Welcome, Wapham crew, guys, gals, ghouls, and otherworldly beings. Let's climb aboard the mothership, secure our tinfoil hats, buckle down tight, and hold on loosely as we soar over the rocky tops of the La Platas on a rocky mountain high, get sucked into the vortex of the Four Corners, and settle down snugly at mile marker 420 in colorful Colorado. I'm your ghostess, TessaTNT, broadcasting from the Mile High Clubhouse tonight. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, and welcome to We Are Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. It is an honor, a pleasure, and a privilege to have you hanging out with me on the airwaves tonight. Hopefully you are safe and sound wherever you are and able to grab your favorite blanket, your favorite drink, perhaps your favorite snack. Cuddle up and let's get into some scary stories. If you want to listen in your free time, whether you're working it, or working out, you can listen to me on Spreaker.com and wherever else you listen to your broadcasts and your podcast. So unfortunately, I was not able to do a broadcast last night. I don't know. I'm perplexed. I don't know why. Every time I do an update or even shut down my computer, and last night I just put it on sleep just so when I come back it won't be changed. There was a change for some reason. My microphone isn't wanting to work, but it is working over here on the line 2 setting, so we're just gonna do it this way and hopefully that is good for you. But yeah, I was really disappointed and stayed up. I think I finally got to sleep at like 9 o'clock in the morning. And then about an hour and a half later, the popo showed up at my house because my bitch-ass neighbor wanted to cry about my fence being broken again, and my chicken pooping in his yard. But I got that fixed. I think that took me like 30 minutes today. I waited till after 5 because it was just too hot in the afternoon, and I have melasma, so I try not to be in the sun too much. But yeah, the officer was very nice. I'm tempted to find out what his name was and bring him some cookies. And I feel bad because I don't know, hopefully I didn't come off unfriendly or anything because I had not gotten but an hour of sleep, maybe an hour and a half. So I was not in my quite active, friendly, charming, personable self. So hopefully he didn't think I was irritated at him, but yeah, I was just ready to go back to bed, which I did, and it didn't take me too long, thank God, to get back to bed, because if you know me, you know how sleep likes to evade me. Alrighty then. So the book that we have been reading is The Best of the Best Horror of the Year. This next chapter is Black and White Sky by Tanith Lee. 1. Almost morning. It is early summer, not quite 5 o'clock. The sky has a colorless lightness, faintly golden in the east across the fields. In the woods, birds sing in pale, clear sprinklings of sound. From a copse, one magpie rises. It flies straight upward. There is a slight visual softness to all distances, perhaps mist or haze. The air is fresh but not unwarm. A second magpie rises, this time not from the copse. The golden edge of the sky intensifies, begins to dazzle. The sun is nearly free of the horizon. The third magpie rises. The fourth magpie rises. The bird chorus redoubles, eagerly encouraging dawn. From the farm over towards the main road, some heavy vehicle or machinery rumbles. A fifth magpie rises. The sun rises. A sixth magpie rises. The sky floods with shell pink and golden liquor. A seventh, Magpie Rises. It was the day when Alice came to clean Cigarette Cottage. Of course, that was not the cottage's proper name. After it was built in the 1930s, someone pastorally minded had christened the place Woodbine Cottage, and following various renovations and the removal of the nameplate above the door, Woodbine still stuck. But George Anderton, moving in during 2003, coined his own private version of the name. In memory of those cigarettes he could recall his grandmother puffing at in the days when smoking was a pleasant habit rather than a capital offense. George himself had smoked, but no longer did so. He had never really been that serious a smoker, but although having successfully given it up some 20 years before, he still occasionally missed them. The act, perhaps, more than any hit. I've counted 24 magpies just as I was walking along the lane from the duck, said Alice, as she put down her bag and accepted a mug of coffee. What do you think of that? Triple hell, said George idly. Alice laughed. She was only about 40 and very attractive. She made no secret of the fact she found George, a man more than 10 years older, attractive too. But she was happily married and so would, hopefully, never impinge on George's solitary country life. He had given up London rather as he gave up smoking, missed the act or idea of it, but not constantly. Women he had not given up, but there had been plenty, too many, he supposed, in his previous life. To be truly alone at last was restful. Once a fortnight Alice came in to dust, hoover, and bleach the bathroom and the cooker. Now and then she cleaned the windows unasked. She charged the going rate, damaged nothing, did not get on his nerves, and was out of the house in never more than 3 hours. Triple hell, why's that? The old rhyme, said George. 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, that stuff. There are several versions. The ones I know all end in 9 magpies. And one of them finishes 7s for heaven and 8s for hell, so 3 times 8 equals 24, triple hell. And what's 9? The devil. Oh, you, she said, beaming at him and liberating the dusters. He was a writer, novels and some stage plays, put on the lyric in the royal court. Now all he seemed to turn out were short stories, but his reputation, if not major, was not quite non-existent. To Alice, he thought, he was a curiosity, maybe a sort of catch in the cleaning market. The rest of her clients were more usual, weekenders or locals with enough money, plus, of course, the duck pub up the lane. When he went upstairs to his workroom, his study, Alice called it, he glanced from the window. Downstairs, by now, the trees in the small front garden and the woods to the back were thickly leafed, obscuring much of the sky. From the cottage's upper story, however, he could see out across the shorter trees to the fields as far as the farm, so he noticed a magpie fly up at once, and then, about half a minute later, another, and then, approximately equally spaced, several more. They rose singly, each from a different area, from behind the ring of trees in the field's edge, from the fields themselves, from over the farm out where the main road to Stantham cut ugly through the curve of the landscape. Downstairs, Alice was gently clinking something. George stood at the window and watched the magpies rising. He thought at first every one from a different spot, yet now and then another one would go up later from the same spot. There seemed always a similar interval, though he did not bother to check it exactly. That was curious. He wondered briefly what had caused it, so many of them and so regular in rising, But then he told himself to stop prevaricating and go back to the computer. Most writers used almost anything, he knew but too well, to absent themselves from work. It is midday. The church clock in the village a mile off chimes out 12. The light is very bright now, metallic and clear. It shines on the hills that rim the distance and sparks up the windows of the cottage. A woman has cycled away about an hour before. The man is working diligently in the room on the upper story, drinking his 4th mug of coffee now. He's on a roll with a story he writes, does not wish yet to stop for lunch. A sluggish car lurches along the lane, heading for the pub. Bees buzz and a few grasshoppers creak on the hedge. A gray squirrel performs acrobatics in the garden trees, then bounds overland for the wood. A magpie rises. It is now the most recent example of hundreds. The man in the cottage might have seen if he had been looking. It flies straight upwards, straight up into the glare of the zenith sun. Light digests it. It has vanished. Smaller birds flutter about their business. Wood pigeons, finches, a robin, a blackbird. Some are already teaching their young to fly. They quarter the lower air, flit past the oak trees and the now wild apple that cast its last blossom only a week before. None of these birds heads directly upward, not even the crow which abruptly wings over, cawing harshly, black as computer ink. A magpie rises. Half a minute or thereabouts ticks away. A magpie rises. Soon after 6 p.m., George Adderton backed up the day's work, checked for emails, none, and switched off the computer. Downstairs, lingering over a drink, he made a swift mental foray into the fridge and promptly decided to visit the duck for dinner. At 7, he opened the door of Cigarette Cottage and stood, gazing through the trees into the glowing upper sky. It was blue, and feathered only by faint eddies of cloud that seemed to foretell a fine tomorrow. The sun was westering towards the hills, visible in gaps, molten yet filmy, at least another hour before it set. This place he had never regretted coming here. The lack of unnecessary human noise, beyond the intermittent, legitimate agricultural sounds from the farm. The birdsong, the notes of various wildlife, the silences. Absorbed, he filled his ears with blackbird music, filled his eyes with the light. He had forgotten the magpies. Then one rose straight up, from the copse across the lane, straight up and into the heart of the westward light, vanishing as if dissolved. George was startled. He returned to himself, refocused his eyes, and waited. Another magpie rose. This one was further over towards the hills, framed in a gap, a small pinpoint of darkness. Perhaps it was not a magpie. He looked at the hands of his watch, counted off the seconds, lifted his eyes. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills. Nothing. No magpie had risen. Crazy, why would it? Behind him, George turned around, moving almost too fast for himself. He saw this next magpie already high above in the last moment before the light devoured it. Had they gone on rising, continuing to rise all day? Where were they going? To the top of the sky? In the duck, the usual evening crowd was sitting over its drinks. George Anderton had lived here long enough by now that 2 or 3 regulars greeted him. In the dining room beyond the front bar, a handful of summer visitors sat, lightly tanned and animated. George scanned them cautiously. He had once been trapped here by a maddish youngish woman who was a fan of his work, and had apparently previously met him in London at a book signing. Her recalled London intentions were not strictly literary, but he was then involved elsewhere. Besides, she was hardly his type, whatever that really meant. Age had not improved her, or her intentions, or his inclinations. It had been difficult to shake her off without being rude. He had finally only managed to by telling her he did not want to be rude, which did the trick. Tonight there was no visitor who appeared to recognize him or care about him in any way. George went to the bar and ordered his meal and a bottle of Beck's. "What do you think it is, then?" Collie asked him, as he rattled a bottle from the fridge. "What's that?" George felt curiously oppressed. He knew already what that would be. He was correct. "Them barmy birds." "Which birds?" My God, George realized he was pretending he had not noticed. Why on earth? But Collie, handing him a glass, explained, "Bloody magpies, going up like rockets all the time." "Are they?" "I suppose you ain't seen it, mate," said Collie, who, like George, hailed from London, and had kept his accent with him, though in situ here, for more than 18 years. Hold on. Sorry about that, I had an incoming. My chicken best friend was caught coming down my hallway. Alright, let's get back to it. Well, I've seen some flying over, but so what? "Here," said Collie to Amethyst, as she came from the kitchen with 2 plates. "Old George ain't bloody seen them magpies going up all day. One every 37 seconds, I reckons." "It's true," said Amethyst, widening her eyes at George through the pleasant steam of 1 meat and 1 vegetarian lasagna. From along the bar, a couple of the other men joined in. They told George and the room in general how Arnold Weller had timed the darn things between 32 and 38 seconds. He had counted them for a whole half hour, over 43 magpies, though old Arnie had lost count, he thought, by a little, not much. 40 or 43 or even 48. Near enough, and still flying up one by one after another, and all of them from different places, or from the places no other bird has been rising from. An elderly voice spoke from the corner, under the oil painting of ducks in flight. "Was on the 1 o'clock news. I heard it. They made a joke about it. Then someone else came in. Some politician said he saw him too, in Sussex or whatever, that morning, and coming into London all the way." "Reports all over the country," someone else said. George turned to Amethyst. "No thanks. No fries, just the steak and salad." "You're clever," said Amethyst. She was in her earliest 20s, bright, respectful, a non-reader who unusually and wrongly seemed to believe writing a novel or play was the act of a wise, well-educated person. "What do you think's causing it?" "I don't know." "But it's weird, isn't it?" "Is it? Maybe not." "Maybe it's global warming," said one of the dining room visitors, moving in to ask where the gents was. Once told, he added, amused, over one shoulder, "Jude says she saw them from the car when we were driving down. I didn't notice, but Jude's gimlet eye picked them out okay." "What's a gimlet eye?" Amethyst asked George over the 2 cooling dinners. "God knows," he said. "I used to know. Can't remember. Old age," he added, smiling. "You're not, old," Amethyst insisted so vehemently and staring in his eyes with wide and certainly ungimlet-like ones. He felt a hint of random desire, but it passed. It was food he lusted after, he decided as he walked through into the pub garden. Dusk was coming now, gradual and inevitable. A moth flew towards him as if in greeting, then on into the lighted pub. Night falls. From the farm the lights blaze out, and along the main road the headlamps of the occasional truck or group of fast cars spangle up the cat's eyes like broken glass. A badger crosses, pausing to snuff at the tainted tarmac. A lucky badger, meandering sluggish yet unscathed, in a lacuna of traffic to the farther side. A frog croaks with a hidden pull. The night wind stirs softly and brushes through the leaves and grasses. A magpie rises, blinking out and passing the stars, which then reappear. The moon, almost full, will rise later. It will show far better than the stars, the rising magpies, 30 or 40 or 50. That passage upward during every half hour within the radius of visibility. The duck burns like a golden lantern in the darkness. It is almost 11 p.m. A couple of vehicles glide down the lane, away to the side roads that lie north and west of Mainland. Later, the more dedicated drinkers emerge, taking various paths homeward. To cross the fields, a young man and girl, pausing to kiss among the new beginning crops, like lovers from Hardy. Behind and sometimes before them, unseen, unnoted, magpies rise one by one, straight up into the stars. The man, who is a writer and has sat in the pub garden until utter darkness beyond the lights closed up the sky, who afterwards had a vodka at the bar, listening with the publican and a few others to the 10 o'clock news, the comments and views of a celebrity, a twitcher, and an eminent ornithologist leaves the duck and himself goes back along the lane. In the doorway of the cottage he stands a moment again. Studying the landscape indoors upstairs, he watches too a while at the workroom window. But he can no longer be certain they are rising. If they are, then not near enough for the lights of his house to catch the white pattern on their wings. They are like ancient Egyptian birds, he thinks, magpies. Their markings seem primal and elder as the spectacle designs about the eyes of certain snakes. In the double hollow of the night, dreamless, he wakes. He hears the eruption of wings leaping at heaven from the roof above his head. Then he gets up and crosses through again into his workroom. Against the yellow three-quarter face of the hot moon, he sees another magpie rise. Another magpie more southerly, sidelit half a minute or 36 seconds after it. In other areas that the moon can find, presently another. Back in bed he switches on the radio for the world to service. But all the BBC will give him now is war, famine, and disease. Misery and a tiny bit of the tune called Lily Bolero. He turns it off and falls asleep again, and dreams the young girl from the pub is stalking him as the maddish woman had tried to do. Nevertheless, he lets the pub girl in. Then, just inside the doorway, she turns into his cleaning woman. Before the dream can become properly erotic, unfortunately, or perhaps actually fortunately, it fades away from him. He does not wake until the alarm clock sounds at 7 a.m. Two. George Anderton no longer bothered regularly to read newspapers. Any allure they ever had for him had melted away in his 40s. 2 days after he saw the first magpie ascending from his window, 2 nights after hearing the other magpie clattering up, as if suddenly evolved from the very slates of the cottage roof. He walked to the village. Orthurst had his point-topped Saxon church and ancient Jews, the scatter of shops and new defunct post office, the bus stop for Stantham Cross and the other pub, the Cart and Plough, and some 200 or so cottages, several dating way back. There was also the unfinished new estate, virtually builder abandoned, that no one had wanted here and was called the Lavvy. At Rosie's, now owned and operated by Pam, he bought some butter, lettuce, pears, and bacon, the Independent and Guardian, and the local Stantham Spotter. "It gives me the creeps," said Pam. She was a nice, comfy old thing of 30 going on 65. "My gran used to tell me they were unlucky, ill-omened birds. If you saw one, you'd had to say, 'Good morrow, Master Magpie,' or even 'Good morrow, Lord Magpie.' Then it might be all right, but I tried not to see them when I was a child. Once one flew right at me on my bike when I was only 7, and 5 minutes after I fell in a ditch, broke my little finger. Look, it never came back straight. Doesn't bend like it should neither." "Poor you," he said. He refrained from saying Gran's scare tactics had freaked Pam out enough that she had been bound to fall off the bike after a close meeting with a magpie. "Can't avoid seeing the blessed things now, can I? Nobody can, and the telly news goes on and on about them. They're everywhere, going up. Did you hear about the plane at Heathrow last night? Yes, of course you did." But he had not heard, slept solidly last night and threw the alarm. Missed the news this morning, had only just now seen the Heathrow report, a secondary headline on the Guardian's front page. It seemed rather than inhaling a flock of the birds, what usually happened, the Boeing had been struck repeatedly by magpies, rising as if blind and insane directly in its path, therefore hitting or being hit by fuselage, wings, and next the undercarriage as the plane descended. The pilot had lost his nerve, many of the passengers too. The co-pilot brought the plane in, but the landing was a bad one, the touchdown heavy, the Boeing slewing across the runway. 3 people had died, and 70 were injured, 5 seriously. Disliking his own pragmatism, George considered it could have been far worse. "On TV breakfast, they said in Scotland," went on Pam, unhappy and excitable at once. "One plane there ditched in a lock." She pronounced this lock, but he nodded. She expanded. "But at Manchester, they've grounded them all. They're going to ground all of them unless they can shoot them out of the sky." He refrained now from asking if she meant the birds or the planes. "No one can get home then except by sea, and they've closed the channel too. It's on page 2 in the Mail. A train struck so many birds in the approach it had to stop. The wheels in the windows were all," she hesitated and grimaced, "black and red." He had by then seen the headline glaring on the mill, "Winged Death Rises from the Tracks." A picture of the stalled train surrounded by firemen and railway workers was accompanied by a caption that began, "They seem to come up out of the holes under the line," said driver Kinrains. Pam, shocking him slightly, abruptly started to cry. He had the urge to put an arm around her, tell her everything would be fine and would get sorted out, but he was unsure. He himself believed this, going on the general everyday mess. And anyway, he had found it in the not-so-distant past where such gestures might land him. "Don't worry, Pam," he temporized. She said, "No, it isn't that. I don't know what it is. My age, I expect." Poor Pam, he thought again, but did not say it. To be gallant might also be misunderstood. He left the shop, having bought the mail as well. The price of an extra paper to appease her, not much of a consolation. All the way back, now downhill to the fields and woods, he could watch the magpies rising on all sides, and behind him, should he turn around and off towards the hills, those specks which now he was sure were magpies too. On his way to the village, going uphill, a single magpie had sprung directly from a bush at the side of the path, and later another from about 3 meters ahead of him. They might, these two, indeed have been engendered out of holes in the ground, out of holes in reality. 1 minute non-existent, and then existing. It was overcast today. The patch of fine weather had disintegrated. Well, this was England. High up, cloud had settled, like a pale gray duvet. And the silence. How silent it seemed. Not even the magpies made a sound, beyond the abrupt clapping of their wings, when near enough. That signature rattling chatter of theirs was oddly always absent. There was a fitful warmish wind that carried a smell from the farm, he thought, not strong or really unpleasant. Animal, somehow depressing. "It's my age, I expect," George told himself with dry mimicry. He had stuck to on the bloody story. Eyewitnesses are mistaken. It is entirely impossible that the huge number of birds people are claiming to have seen could even be found in the whole of the British Isles. An argument broke out at once between the 4 guests in the studio. The presenter tried to quieten them in vain. George switched to another channel. A soap filled the eye and air with over-exaggerated drama that, beside the theater of the swarming magpies, seemed ludicrous, laughable, and redundant. The sun was low over the hills. It had emerged from the duvet of cloud into a swollen vividity, murky orange, more like that of a wintry dawn. The full moon had not been visible last night. When the microwave disgorged the frozen pasty, presumably cooked, he started to eat it. The next news told him and showed him men and women interminably shooting at rising magpies. Some birds fell at once, some fluttered and spiraled away, mutilated and dying. Some, entirely missed, rose on into the overcast of the TV-recorded afternoon. On the first channel they were still shouting, red in the face under their make-up tans. The presenter, unable to control the verbal fracas, shrugged wryly. The phone sounded in the front room. George wiped his hands and went to answer it. "Hi, George, darling. Have you seen the news?" Yes. It was Lydia, an actress who had appeared in one of his plays. They had slept together at the time. Lydia was his own age, but beautiful in a way not often seen. He had always liked her voice very much. He found he accordingly tended, during her phone calls, to hear her voice rather than what she said. What, Lydia?" "Yes, it's an awful line, isn't it? I've heard half the lines are down." "How do you mean?" He thought. Once more he knew. Once more he did. "They fly right into them, poor birds, all tangled. Then the lines come off those post things, and it's as if they can't see, or only see one thing, the upper sky. Do you have it there, Georgie?" "Everyone has it everywhere," he said. "It seems, at least in Britain." Sean told me it just stops at the sea. What exactly stops at the sea? What did he say they called it? Oh, I can't remember, but it's dire, isn't it? I suppose it is. The RSPB, someone else said loudly, but it was the television in the other room. The sound, for some reason, had revved right up, then sunk away. And I just sit at the window and watch them. It's quite hypnotic. They just go up, straight up, and disappear into the clouds. I wonder why. Yes, I think everyone wonders that. I don't think I've ever seen a magpie in central London before, not here. No. Everything else, sparrows, gulls, pigeons, and pelicans and swans in the park, but magpies? None of the other birds are doing it, are they? He thought they were not. Then again, he had been noticing or imagining the other birds were rather quieter. There was less singing, less of the territorial tweets and cries. The dawn chorus, did that still happen? It was too early in the season for all birdsong to taper off. As for the magpies themselves, they made no sound as he had been aware for a while, aside from the flurry of their wings as they rose. Through the window in the small front garden, a magpie evolved from the rogue apple tree. It lifted straight up into the half-tone upper sky. He could have sworn it had not been there a second before. "Lydia, are you still—" "Hello?" she said. "Hello, darling. Oh, bugger, I can't hear you. Just a sizzle sort of thing. Never mind. If you can hear me, come up to town soon, won't you? We can go to dinner at the Royale." The light in the other room flickered. George heard the TV again. The new voice, a woman's, was telling someone that the lower or upper stratosphere, he did not take it in, was full of birds floating, only that, like a fleet at anchor. Updrafts or thermals carrying and supporting it, or them, hundreds, thousands, but when he went back into the room, the pasty, which going by the commandment on the label under no circumstances must anyone reheat, had congealed to a cold gooey fudge, and the screen was blank. Only the woman's impersonal and rather annoying voice talking of helicopter gunships or ground-to-air missiles. Another program, then, about Afghanistan or Pakistan. George turned off the TV. Not with a bang, he thought, as if an alien authoritarian voice was speaking also in his head. Not with a bang, but with a feather. During the night, the battery-powered radio, which he had left on, woke him with a blast of between-items noise, some sort of militant jangle now representing the World Service, and obviously designed violently to awaken any insomniac who had managed to fall asleep. So he heard that an Italian plane approaching Bournemouth Airport had found itself unable to land due to the maelstrom of birds. Having circled for some time, all the while with birds smashing into it, it headed back out to sea. An adjacent bulletin announced the plane had gone down in the water, not a mile out. All passengers and crew were feared dead. On the heels of this came reports that European and U.S. airlines were refusing to let their craft attempt landing anywhere on British soil until the avian crisis was resolved. Countless Britons would be stranded. Perhaps they were glad. It seemed the bird blanket, as one commentator called it, was limited to the British island, also a recent coining, involving only England, Wales, and Scotland. The radio then, despite having new batteries, began to fail. He switched it off. That the failure had nothing to do with the batteries, he understood perfectly. Morning, noon, evening, night, time has passed, is passing, passes. Above the sky, they are to be visualized, the fleets, massed close and massing even more closely as more and more of the components rise up to fill them, pack them tight, a black and white expanded and expanding cumulus. Spy planes have taken photographs. By now the phenomenon is visible from space. Satellites relay batches of curious pictures. Fighter craft have also risen. They have blasted out gaps in the living, quasi-suspended, fluttering cloud ceiling. There has been speculation as to what precisely keeps the bird cloud in place. Some oblique abnormal thermal, perhaps. Some unforetold updraft? Maybe created even by the bird's own upward flight? Or else it is all some new facet of pollution, global warming, some scientific experiment that has, of course, misfired, gone wrong. Human worthlessness and wickedness in general. As for the aerial fighters, frequently their planes ingest the half-destroyed bodies of their composite black and white target. Then the planes fall too, like the dead and dying burning birds. Aerial activity is cancelled, and in any event, the endless streams of magpies continue to rise. One bird, it has been estimated, roughly every half or three-quarter minute. During an hour, 100, sometimes 160 birds are reckoned to be lifting from every square mile of land, if that is at all conceivable, likely, possible. Eyewitness statements, even those of trained observers, vary precariously. Beaters plunge from a while through fields, woods, gardens, along hillsides, over moors, by riverbanks, and guns blast like a never-ending soundtrack of war. In towns and cities, citizens are summarily ordered off the streets, while rapacious bird dogs and their handlers seek and always find their quarry. But for all the birds slaughtered, quick and clean, misjudged and horribly, for all the carnage and the debris, and the stink, the pity of it all. Poor things, poor things. New birds rise and keep on rising, 50, 100, 200 to a square mile. They seem to burst from the concrete skin of the streets, the stony ground, the trunks of the trees and walls of buildings, out of the impervious world itself, self-perpetuating, ineradicable, inexhaustible. Feathers lightly, omnipresently carpet the earth. Feathers are caught in trees, lie along windowsills, drift into offices, houses, shops, stations, subways, alleys, and avenues, caves and churches, libraries and reservoirs. Along the side roads, high trees, and motorways, the feathers drift, black and white, and red with recent blood. Several scorched and many broken. Cars and other vehicles lie tumbled along these thoroughfares too. Broken, some of them also, from multitudes of collisions with the bodies of the rising birds which, all dead now and decaying, are plastered against their sides, stuck in their mechanical entrails and between the teeth of their wills. Feathers pop from the air as well, a thin drizzle of feathers, an autumn of feathers, always falling. Black as ink, white as snow, often sheened mysteriously, mystically blue. Down from the sky that darkened over now and made tomb-like after each invisible day's end, reveals no sun, no moon, no single star. The magpie cloud, the blanket, an opaque dome, shuts everything out. Day is dusk, night an upside-down abyss. No more golden mornings, no more ruby settings of the sun. Sometimes a feeble rain falls too. It is very warm and has a filthy taste, smelling of chickens and giving off a strange, sooty chemical undertone. There have been great rushings to and fro on the hand naturally. flurries of anger and protest, crime and hoarding, as well as the useless bird war. Then came escapings towards the nearest coast, where the blanket, the dome, stops, and the fearful ceiling uncannily comes undone. But the road, long deserted, ruins of cars and campers, buses and bikes, provide evidence of how few made it there, or if they did, they will have managed it by other means. To the majority left side, the trap of Britain. Unable to reach any coast, the idea of that exit point is by now nearly a myth. Can it be true that the coast, any coast, is clear? It is true. All coasts are clear as glass. Just past the beaches, or shingle or stones or rocks or cliffs, the river mouths, estuaries, bays, and sandbanks, and the dunes, the spits, the coves, there were the surf or the big rollers began. At Eastbourne, Great Yarmouth, Whitby, Berwick upon Tweed, at Helmsdale and Melvage, Aberystwyth, Weston-super-Mare, and Plymouth. There, for there it finishes. To look up there, standing in the fringes of the water, is to see suddenly the calmness or disturbance of actual sky. Clouds, real weather, light, for there even the night is brilliant again with its stars and moon, with summer lightning, with distance, open heavens, open, and gulls fly over in a graceful ordinary way. And beyond, out across the shining skylit sea, the islands, all of them, are quite unclosed. The Orkneys, the head bridges, white and man stand sheer, like miraculous ghosts, like platinum pebbles or a horizon of pure glow. And the hymn of Ireland, that too, and the longer strand of France. These are banks of deep blue smoke under a halo of moon or moonshine. What then of the ones who managed an escape, who sped away from Britain's edges in the racing ferries, fishing boats, speedboats, and yachts? Did they, having reached the shining other shores, glance back? Surely they did. Surely they still do. For out of Britain now no television picture comes, no telephone call, no email, no text. Britain, robbed of her mass of communication, of a sky through which signals can glow, has grown silent and primitive, secretive and supernatural, as in the ages of darkness. Nor is she to be penetrated, her airways shut, her roads and railway lines negotiable only on foot, and that with vast difficulty. All this shutness, the secret, is all that can be seen of her through the satellite cameras, telescopes, and other lenses trained on her. With flat and weary persistence, not even the straining periscopes of nuclear subs, drawn in from the Atlantic to patrol her shores like voiceless wolves, can determine anything much beyond her emptied coastline, her immobile interiors veiled by cobwebs of shadow. She is a darkling plain, except where, now and then, something surfaces through the dimness like a fleck of flint in dirty water, a tiny black bubble in poison lemonade, a magpie rising, flying straight up, and then another, and then 3. The pub looked different by now, and it went without saying the pub was different. In the first weeks, the soldiers, initially in multifarious vehicles, then on foot, brought oil matches, lamps, and candles, besides gas canisters to swell the store at the Duck. Out here in the heart of the country, only electricity had formerly been available, and the series of chefs at the Duck always preferred, apparently, to cook with gas. Lucky. Electricity now, along with the phone and TV and the radio, the computer and the World Wide Web had all become things of the past. A recent past, but one which already seemed to have existed some centuries ago. Tap water was gone too. Reservoirs were polluted with incredible amounts of feathers, even by dilute, disseminated bird crap, which had descended into them. For while the magpies had and did ascend, their innumerable cast-offs, sometimes including their slaughtered bodies, fell down. In certain parts of the woodland, you came into a stretch where branches were thickly coated in feathers instead of leaves. But the leaves were dying anyway. The woods, the copses, even the fields. Deceived by the constipated yet oddly defecating sky, believed winter had suddenly returned. Half the trees were bare, the rest shedding their parched, rusted foliage. The grass was also turning brown. Not much hope of grain or cereal, no promise of fruit. Nothing really, it seemed, could grow. But for now, some fresh foods persisted. Though the fridges and freezers had long since surrendered, they did not eat too badly at the Duck. Fresh meat, rabbit, chicken, beef, and mutton. They had been lucky there too. Those near the big cities had had their flocks and herds sequestered by the army early on, before all transportation was understood to be impractical. Fish or ordinary low-flying birds might be contaminated and were off the menu. However, tomatoes, salads, even potatoes, all these from hothouses run off generators were available. And certain canned, dry, or otherwise less perishable goods brought from Stantham, currently a 2-day trek aside, obviously, from any extra time given to bargaining with, fighting off, or else eluding the Statham locals. They had boiled the water and put it through filters. Now everyone drank bottled alcohol. Thank God, George Anderton thought, came with its own indigenous preservatives and antiseptics. He had even relearned a liking for warm beer. Tonight he was sharing a long table with 3 of the refugee families now living at the Lavy, the unfinished estate at Orthurst. He had been en route for the coast when their cars, spattered with birds, gave up the struggle. Some of the estate houses were not in too bad condition, floored, roofed, and insulated with closable front doors and glazed windows. The lack of electricity and plumbing hardly mattered either, of course. No one had any. The refugees were all right, causing little trouble, only grateful not to be cast out. They had already lost their homes, and there had been draconian rationing in London and elsewhere, and plans for some type of peculiar military call-up of the young that seemed to have no purpose. They took to Orthurst as the drowning take to the solid land, and each communal evening the cart and plow, like the Duck, did stunning business, if anyone had charged or paid. Over by the bar, Amethyst was laughing with one of the 2 soldiers who had stayed behind, when the rest were forced marched back to Stantham barracks. The young man leant forward and kissed her. An entirely normal scene. It took on instantly a look of utter abnormality. "What worries me," said Geoffrey from London and the Lavy, "is the nuclear power stations. How are they coping with this? Have they shut down, or are they just leaking radiation?" concluded Liz from Chatham and the Levy. "I'll tell you one thing," said Dave, Liz's partner. "They'll have taken bloody good care of the oil rigs off Scotland. Sea's supposed to be clear there, innit? You can bet they've got those rigs well protected." "Who do you mean?" asked Jeremy. "The so-called government? They'll have scarpered straight down their bleeding bunkers, and they couldn't run anything anyhow. couldn't run a piss up in the toilet. A trio of children watched, wide-eyed. The eldest was only 7, and Sharon of Reigate and the Lavvy quickly diverted their attention back to the pandas on the special kids' napkins Collie had produced. "What I miss," said Sharon's boyfriend, Rob, George thought he was called, "is the sport. All had to be stopped, didn't it? Motor racing, rugby, even golf." Jeremy said in a light, grieving voice, "And that match, Arsenal versus Brighton, that would have been a cracker." Jim was plodding by to the bar. "Want another, anybody?" They did. It was handy, George thought, the way these people talked about this, regularly skimming their terrors, yet also distracting each other with the pandas a political complaint, food and drink and company. He was glad, too, that the smell of oil and kerosene and candles, some of which were scented, the smell even of people, now less washed and over-deodorized in compensation, helped mask the insidious presence of that metallic chicken stench that dropped with all else from the sky, but probably, too, they were all becoming used to it. Soon, they would not even notice. Outside, it was jet-black, abyssal night, the only kind, finally, but the pub basked in its pre-electric flame-lit radiance. This was how faces, forms, suddenly moving hands and glasses might have looked in paintings from the Renaissance. Similar, at least, he corrected himself, for constructed light was bound to have altered somehow. You knew, even in the Victorian era, no oil lamp had cast quite this sort of illumination or shadow. Everything changed. And the pub's noise, chatter and clatter, and sometimes a sing-song were also like that. They stood to replace the notes of Mobile's recorded music radio and still did not make an elder noise, but a modern one, anxiously filling up the void. Any one which void loomed an agglomeration of silence the magpies had created. The magpies that themselves no longer chattered or called, that made no sound. How silent, then, must the upper skies, where they clung or hung? Dumb and deaf, all questions futile, all answers obsolete. As Tim put the new bottles on the table, George saw Alice come in out of the dark. She paused a moment to speak to Amethyst, who nodded, while her soldier turned aside to light a roll-up. No one seemed likely to object it now. George could see Alice, too, had changed. She had lost weight, become oddly fragile and attenuated, her hair singing blown out. There was a bruise on her left cheekbone. She put her hand to it absently. Amethyst was pouring Alice a glass of wine. No doubt one of the birds had struck her. In the last weeks that had begun to happen. Before the birds had seemed, when rushing upward from the ground or wherever it was they burst from, to strike only inanimate objects. But recently several people had some tell of a magpie springing abruptly past them, inches away, the slap of a wing, long scratch of a claw, minor concussion of round body and hollow bones. Old Tim claimed to have seen one bird dash straight upward through the body of a cow that had been grazing on a slope behind the farm. She had not seemed hurt, just frightened, but later a bruised and reddened area had appeared along her ribs. They had decided it was best to slaughter her quickly, and then remove the perhaps contaminated meat when preparing her for eating. But Tim had always romanced, embellished facts. Even something like the thing that now went on might seem worth enhancing to old Tim. Alice raised the glass and drank. Her eyes connected with George's. She seemed about 20, he thought, an infallible, revealing illusion. She smiled a nervous little smile as if she had never seen him before. But George smiled broadly back and beckoned, getting to his feet, and Jeremy obligingly shoved himself and family and their chairs along the table to make room. "Oh," said Alice very low, "I didn't mean to. You're not. It's nice to see you, Alice." "I'm so sorry I haven't been up to the cottage." "Well, cleaning the house doesn't seem so important, frankly, do you think?" "I suppose. I don't know. Todd was her husband. Always wants everything clean until..." Alice stopped. She drained her glass. She glanced at George under her lashes. Their unexpected meeting had become a liaison of two spies, but what was the espionage Alice had in mind? "It's fine, Alice." Jeremy leaned over and refilled her glass. It was the same red wine, or near enough, and everything was free. She thanked Jeremy, but he had already turned tactful away, leaving the spies to their clandestine conversation in code. "How are you?" George asked. This was a fatal leading question, and he knew it. She did not answer. Then she softly said, "It's awful, isn't it?" "Yes, Alice, it's awful." "I'm scared," she said. He saw the oldest child take note, and an expression of the fear creep into his face. George smiled broadly again. He said to her, "Why don't we go back to the cottage? Talk there. I can walk you home later. I've even got some spare food." She, too, had noticed the child. She brightened, falsely, but giving quite an actorly performance. "That would be... Yes, let's do that. Why not?" As they were going out the door, Collie appeared and handed George another bottle of wine. "Last of the best Merlot. Go on, have a treat. You know, I knew a feller once. He always wanted a pub. Then he comes into some bosh, buys the pub, gets it done up, cracking ace, cook, full cellar, top-class guest rooms. What you think he does then?" George and Alice waited between the light and night. A sing-song had started. "Oliver's Army" by Elvis Costello behind the bar. Amethyst was snogging the soldier. He locks everyone out and keeps the place to himself. Just for him, I mean. Nobody else let in, ever. The Bugle, it's called, up Camden Way. What do you think of that? "This mark on my face, it isn't anything to do with birds. He hit me. Todd, he hit me. Christ, when was this? This morning? He just did it." "Had it happened before?" "No, not really." "Where's he now?" "With Pam boys, you know, from the shop." They stood still in the lane, in the dark among the alopecia of the trees, balancing on spent feathers. No car would try to drive through, not anymore, and footsteps would be clearly audible. He had turned the torch off because its batteries were running low. He had had a solar-powered torch too, but it went without saying it was unrechargeable. He had an urge to touch her, hold her, comfort, but George grasped very well this was not gallantry or outrage, despite the fact that the image of her bastard husband hitting her incensed him. No, it was desire, lust. But then, what else was left? It puzzled George too. The manner in which, above all else, carnality survived, just as biological hunger and thirst, and an extraneous liking for the taste and effect of alcohol. Oh God, the last bloody days of Pompeii. Eat, drink, and be merry before the volcano exploded, or the circus lions came to tear you limb from limb. Just as in the old B movies, but also be fair, here at least, where some quiet remained, courtesy and camaraderie also persisted. a sort of familial gentleness. Be gentle, then. I'm so sorry, Alice. She came into his arms, and in the near-blind blackness of the lane, she was beautiful, smooth and pliant, and her hair curiously rough and savage. Her mouth was as appetizing as he had believed it would be. When they drew apart, she shuddered. Can we get inside the house? I don't like being out here in the dark. He switched the torch back on. Not until they reached the gate of Cigarette Cottage did it occur to him he had not heard, nor even in the ray of the torch seen, a single magpie. By some fluke, they had somehow missed the ones that must have gone on rising all about as they continually rose, as he had even seen them rising at 6 this evening. What power sex had, sex, not love, that drove out fear. During the night, he went to get a bottle of water downstairs and stood at the window looking out into the front garden. 3 foxes grouped there, limned by light of the candle. All males, he thought, young, healthy enough, but huddled on the wild lawn and staring in at him, exactly as he stared out at them. It was as if they wanted something from him. He wished he could offer something, but maybe what they asked for was what everyone wanted, an answer. Their eyes flamed, all surface luminous, in the spiritless way that made him think of rabies posters from the 1970s, or of demons. Animals had been behaving oddly for days. You did not notice, then an especially unnatural event made you see, and so recall other incidents. He had first become aware of it with a cluster of robins, 9 or 10, then almost 20 of them, a flock almost like that of starlings, flying round and round the copse, before dazzling off through the dirty, dreary day twilight towards the farm. Robins were generally solitary, just as foxes were, out of the mating season, but there had been the cats too. Each screamed and cried and ran towards you or from you, still calling. One he had met in the lane. It had a magpie feather in its mouth. The cat hurried up and down, not dropping the feather, not chewing it, growling low in its throat. Some animals had simply vanished. Consensus opinion had it they were hibernating, misled as were the trees. That, or they had got wise to the idea they also might be shot for food. The absence of all gray squirrel activity, squirrels that even in a real midwinter were often about, was telling enough. He had not seen or heard any frogs or pigeons, nor heard a single dog bark or howl for weeks either. There were no insects, even the crows, moths had gone away. George turned from the foxes, collected the water, and went back upstairs. Alice sat up in the bed, no longer sobbing. She had wept after they first made love, then fallen suddenly asleep against him. Later she woke and told him she had always wanted him, had fantasies about him. But you're better. So there had been more sex, rich, brain-flooding orgasm. And then she had begun to sob again, could not stop. She said, "It isn't about him. Sold him. He can fuck off. It's the rest. It reminds me of that Hitchcock film." From the story by Daphne du Maurier, was it? George did not say that the short story had been far bleaker and more terrible than the film, but those birds attacked, didn't they? He reminded her instead, "Our magpies, they just fly upward." "Oh," Alice whispered. "What's going to happen?" She knew he could not tell her, beyond the obvious, which was bad enough. He said, "It'll be all right, Alice." "Will it?" "Yes." And then she had calmed, knowing, he supposed, as he did, that either it would or it would not. Out of their hands, better off also therefore out of their minds. Now they drank the water. "Can I stay?" she said like a child. "Please do stay." "I can leave once it's lighter. I don't want you to feel. I know you like to be alone." "How do you know that?" he inquired playfully. "So you can write." "That," he said. He visualized the unfinished story trapped there on the computer screen, now lost in space. Backing up had hardly mattered when the whole bloody lot went. He could have foretold and printed it, but then why write stories while Rome burned? "Do you remember the PM talking just before Radio 4 went off the air?" she surprised him by saying. "I didn't listen. He got on my tits, frankly." But that night, he was so good, it brought up the best in him. They laughed bitterly, then lay down to sleep, back to back. How long since he had felt that sumptuous comfort, female flesh against his, and for how much longer, till the muffled sun rose behind the black and white sky, until the food and bottled water were all gone? Tears ran also from his eyes. He cried then quietly, not to wake her. The pillow soaked them up, his tears, as eternity soaked up all such flimsy things. Weeping, blood, the shells of beasts and men. In sleep he felt, rather than heard, a vague amorphous rumbling. Thunder? Some storm created by the choking of the stratus, or phantom train perhaps, once more enabled to run all those miles off and stand them. Asleep he did not care. He was dreaming of Lydia, faithless after all as Alice, or Todd, Lydia in that hotel in Paris 13 years ago. In the moment before daybreak, or what now passed for it, George's dreams altered into a perfectly coherent recollection of researching magpie legends, which he had done about 9 days before. The book was an old one, something he had picked up in London in the 1990s. A writer never knew, he had always maintained, what might, or not, ultimately be useful. Birds of ill omen and evil luck. This had been the heading, but at the end of the section came a concluding paragraph with the subheading, Exonerating the Magpie. The magpie is often badly thought of as reputable. Reputedly, it refused to don full black mourning at the death of Christ. However, this would seem to be a misunderstanding of the story. In an older version, the magpie donned half mourning, it is true, to show respect of Christ's suffering and death. But the bird's snow-white feathers were intended to indicate that life continues after death, and that indeed Christ himself would rise physically from his tomb. Why else does the magpie remain with the zodiac sign of Virgo, the Virgin, which connects directly with the Virgin Mary, the Mother of Christ? At least, apparently, Jesus and Mary were sure that the magpie was both innocent of all blame and a witness to the great truth. And for that reason, the Virgin herself added to his elegant attire the extraordinary sheen of blue, Mary's own sacred color, which is to be seen most evidently on his wings. Almost morning, technically. It is about 20 minutes short of 5 o'clock. The sky has a colorless darkness, but is strangely faded at a point near the zenith. Gradually, this thinning of an upper canopy begins to fill with muffled, dulled, but undeniable light. In the woods, birds do not sing. Then a shrill chorus, not sung but warning, surges up, fragments and ends. From the copse across the lane, no birds rises. No magpie rises. All about nothing stirs. Silence is concrete now, stone. To scan from horizon to horizon is to fail to detect any movement. Not an animal slinks or runs along the earth, let alone takes wing in the lower element of the sky. No magpie rises. No magpie rises. Since 8 p.m. yesterday evening, as surprisingly only a very few have noted, nowhere on the landmass of Britain has a single magpie risen to fly straight upward or in any direction. Above, just east of the zenith, the whole, for so it is, continues dully to grow lighter. Perhaps, too, it is perceptibly widening, just a very little. Then to the north, another dim, vague thinning seems to be taking place. Another occult lightning appears to be wearing through. Over the fields, miles up it seems, and in some other dimension, a loud, indescribable crack bellows through the air. A splintering line, scribbled in silvery radioactive ink, careers across the massed dawn dusk of the heavens. A kind of storm, cloud shift, and whirlwind discourages darkness. The episodes of lights brilliantly flash now, knife-like, then the sky is falling. It is falling everywhere, far off, near, immediately overhead. It falls in masonry blocks which, as they descend, drop apart in chunks and waterfalls and tidal waves, and all is blundering and spinning downward. Bodies, the corpses of dead birds, a million, a trillion, lifeless and almost weightless yet in this unthinkable and unavoidable mass, a weight of unguessable and incorrigible proportions. The air resounds to a type of steely scream, whether voiced or only a byproduct of the avian deluge. It swamps and pierces all and everything. Death begins to slam against the earth. The prelude and packs are awesome enough. Before vision becomes only a mosaic, like scenes from an ancient and damaged film, it is feasible to see whole boughs snapped off from trees, on buildings, a slide and tumble of slates and chimneys and TV aerials, satellite dishes shattering and scattered, smashing with the white-black downpour of death to the ground below. From the church in the village, the clock is silent as its automatic hands approach 10 to 5, yet the bell in the tower, if barely audible, clings dolefully. Part of the church roof has been riven open, and cascading by, the dead are striking the bell. But now the next phase of impact is arriving. To this the prelude was nothing. In the woods the young trees reel or toppling. Hedgerows and fences crumple and disappear. From the little pool huge gouts of water are displaced. Who would have thought it could hold so much? Whole roofs buckle now, joists give way, windows collapse. In the village, street shop fronts disintegrate, one after the other as if bombed. The pavement and road are piled high, the gardens. At the half-built estate, all building is coming undone. Something is on fire at the farm, smoke curdling upwards, but blotted away almost at once as the rain of the dead pours on. The main road is hidden. Even the stranded cars are covered over. Fields, tracks, hills, landscape, all now under this thick white-black snow. Through the cacophony of rushing, the whine and shrill of the great lost scream, no individual sound is to be deciphered. The cottage on the lane is piled high as its roof, as if the discolored sandbags. The pub is only a mound, a sort of heap of unclean washing, featureless and silent, a mashed tree lying against it. The magpies fall, the ultimate gush of the volcano. They drop and strike and crush and break and are broken. They cover and they bury everything. They load the world like bandaging, like grave wrappings, and still they are falling. The heads of distant oak trees, drowned, eradicated. And the stench of the thunder that seems never likely to end, tempest, tsunami, eruption. Poor things. Poor things. It is 5 a.m. The church clock does not chime, even if anyone could hear it. High, high above the fall, from the widening, shining chasms in the darkness, light foams clear as clean water, and in the east the sun has risen, is visibly rising like the pitiless eye of man himself. Not for the first time. From an idea by John King. Monster Makers. The Monster Makers by Steve Rasnick Tim. This is all I can bear of love. Robert is calling the children in, practically screaming it. How we all need to go, now. But I'm too busy gazing at the couple as they talk to the park ranger, the way their ears melt, noses droop, elongating into something else as their hair warps and shifts color. Their spines bend and expand, arms and legs crooked impossibly, and their eye sockets migrating across their faces so rapidly they threaten to evict the eyeballs. "Grandpa, please!" Little Evie cries out, but now I look at the park ranger, who has fallen to his knees, his face pale and limbs trembling, mouth struggling to form a word that does not yet exist, because it isn't the way it is in the movies. Human beings cannot accept such change so easily. At some point, the mind must shut down and the body lose itself with no one left to tell it what to do. "Please, Grandpa, now!" Evie wails, and the intensity of her distress finally gets to me, so that I hobble over to the battered old station wagon as fast as I can, which isn't very fast, because Evie is that special grandchild, you see. Evie has my heart. The car bucks once as Robert gives it gas too quickly. It rattles, then corrects itself. Alicia is safely in the back seat beside me, but I'm not sure if she ever left. She doesn't move as much as she used to, but it's amazing how young she looks. Her long hair is still mostly blonde, even though she's about my age, whatever that might be. We agreed long ago not to keep track anymore. I've loved her as long as I've known her. The trouble is, these days, I can't remember how long. The grandkids are both on the other side of Alicia. They're small, so I can't see all of them. Just 4 skinny legs which barely reach beyond the front edge of the seat, and the occasionally equally skinny arm. They kick and wave, thrilled. Despite their fear, they have no understanding of what they've caused or why. They are quite excited about what's happening to them. I suspect this is the way some addicts or athletes feel. Something takes over you as if it were a spirit or a god, seizing your blood and bones, your muscles, and it makes you run around or die. From this angle, there's no discernible difference between Evie and Tom. But they are not twins except in spirit. They sing softly as they often do, so softly I can't make out the words. But I've come to believe that their singing is the background music to all of my thoughts. As we leave the park, I can hear the long howls behind me, the humanity disintegrating from those poor people's voices. My grandchildren laugh out loud, giddy from the experience. These changes always seem to happen around certain members of my family, although none of us has precisely understood the relationship or the mechanism. Why did the couple change, but not the ranger? I have no idea. Perhaps it is some tendency in the mind, some proclivity of the imagination, or some random genetic bullet. My grandchildren possess a prodigious talent, but it's not a talent anyone would want to see in action. Up in the front passenger seat, Jackie pats Robert's shoulder. I don't know if this is meant as encouragement or if he even needs it. My son has always been sane to a fault. His wife's face looks worried. The skin, so tight across her cheeks and chin, is as if she wears a latex mask. But then Jackie always was the nervous sort. She's not of this family. She simply married into it. Dad, I thought I asked you not to tell them any more stories. Robert's voice is barely under control. They're both angry with me, furious. They blame me for all of this, but they try not to show it. I don't think it's because they're careful with my feelings. I think it's because they're somewhat frightened of me. Telling stories, that's what grandfathers do, I say. It's how I can communicate with them. The stories of our lives and deaths are secrets, even from ourselves. All we are able to share are these substandard approximations, but we still have to try, unless we want to arm ourselves with loneliness. I just tell the children fairy tales, Robert. That's all. Stories about monsters. Something they already know about. Monster stories won't turn you into a monster, son. Fairy tales simply tell you something you already knew in a somewhat clever way. Once upon a time, perhaps gods and monsters walk the earth, and a human might choose to be either one, but not anymore. Now people grow and age and die and then are forgotten about. It's the Great Circle, or whatever you want to call it. It's sobering information, but it can't be helped. I don't tell Robert this. He isn't ready to hear it. He loves his poor, pathetic flesh too much. Why wouldn't you stop? What will it take to make you stop? Robert is howling from behind the steering wheel. For just a moment, I think he's about to change, expand, become some sort of wolf thing, but he is simply upset with me. Robert is our only child, and I love him very much, but he has always been vulnerable, frightened by the most mundane of dangers, as if he were unhappy to have been born a mortal human. I'm afraid the only kind there is. Robert always refused to listen to my bedtime stories, so he's really in no place to evaluate whether they are dangerous or not. The members of our family have been shunned for ages, thought to be witches, demons, and worse. No one wants to hear what we have to say. Your children simply understand the precariousness of it all, and this is how they express it. No more, Dad, okay? No more today. Whatever my son decides to do, he's likely to keep us all locked up at home from now on. The only reason we went out today was because he knows the children need to get out now and then, and he didn't think we'd run into anybody in that big state park. Besides, it doesn't happen every time, not even every other time. There's no way to predict such things. I've witnessed these transformations again and again, but even I do not understand the agency involved. I can't blame him, I guess. Sometimes human life makes no sense. We really shouldn't exist at all. Back at the old farmhouse, I'm suddenly so exhausted I can barely get out of the car. It's as if I've had a huge meal and now all I can manage is sleep. The adrenaline of the previous few hours has come with the cost. I suspect my food must eat me rather than the other way around. Alicia is even worse than before, and Robert and Jackie each have to pull on an arm to get her to stand. The grandkids push on her, but giggling and aren't really helping. Once inside, they take us up to our room. I get so exhausted, I tell them. I know, Jackie replies. You should just stop it. We'd all be happier if you just made it stop. She's like all the others. She doesn't understand. It happens, but I've never been sure we can make it happen. Perhaps we simply show what has always been. Her children are learning about death. It's a lesson not everyone wants to learn. She must think that because I'm an older man, I'm likely to do foolish things, but we have such a limited time on this planet. I want to tell her, why should we avoid the foolish? I feel like that deliverer of bad news whom everyone blames. Robert is less courteous as he guides us up the stairs, his movements abrupt and careless. He's obviously lost all patience with this caring for elderly parents, this endless drama whenever the family goes out. He'll make us all stay home now, planted in front of the television, transfixed by God knows what mindless comedy, locked away so that we can't cause any more trouble. But the children have to go out now and then. An active child trapped inside is like a bomb waiting to go off. Periodically, he loses his balance and crashes me into the railing, the wall, the door frame. Each time he apologizes, but I suspect it is intentional. I don't mind especially. Each small jolt of pain wakes me up a bit more. You have to stay awake, I think, in order to know which world you are in. By the time they lay both of us down in the bed, I'm practically blind with fatigue. Almost everything is a dirty yellow smear. It's like a glimpse of an old photograph whose colors have receded into a waxy sheen. Perhaps this is the start of sleep, or the beginning of something else. Several times during the middle of the night, Alicia crawls beneath the bed. Is this what a nightmare is like? Sometimes I crawl under the bed with her. The floor is gritty, dirty, and uncomfortable to lie on. It's like a taste of the grave. It's what I have to look forward to. I pat Alicia's arm when she cries. At least you still have your yellow hair, I tell her. She looks at me so fiercely I back away. Far, far back, under the bed into the shadows, where I can hear the winds howl and the insects' mad mutter. I can stay there only a brief while before it sickens me, but it still seems safer than lying close to her. I wake up the next morning with my hand completely numb, sleeping quietly beside my face. I scrape the unfilling flesh against the rough floorboards until it appears to come back to life. Alicia isn't here. She's wandered off. Although much of the time she is practically immobile, she has these occasional adrenaline-driven spurts in which she moves until she falls down or someone catches her. She is so arthritic. These bouts of intense activity must be agony for her. I could hear the grandchildren laughing outside, and there is this note in their tone that drives me to the window to see. The two darlings have the mail carrier cornered by the garage. We never get mail here, and I think how sad it is that this poor man will doubtless lose his life over an erroneous delivery. They chatter away with their monkey-like talk at such a high pitch and speed I cannot follow what they say, but the occasional discreet image floats to the top. Screaming heads and bodies in flame. None of these images appear in any of the stories I have told them, although, of course, Robert will never believe this. What he does not fully appreciate is that out in the real world, all heads have the potential for screaming and all bodies are in fact burning all the time. On the edge of the yard, I spy Alicia. She has taken off all her clothes again and now scratches about on all fours like some different kind of animal. The Roberts of the world do not wish to admit that humans are animals. We may fancy ourselves better than the beasts because of our language skills, because we possess words in abundance. But all that does is empower us with excuses and equivocations. The mail carrier has begun to change. He struggles valiantly, but to no avail. Already his jaw has lengthened until it disconnects from the rest of his face, wagging back and forth with no muscle to support it. Already his hair drifts away and his fleshier bits have begun to dissolve. These are changes typical, I think, of a body left in the ground for months. At first, Evie laughs as if watching a clown running through his repertoire of shenanigans, but now she has begun to cry. She is the madness of children, but I must do what I can to minimize the damage. I make my way stiffly downstairs with a desperate grip on the banister. My joints, like so much broken glass inside my flesh, and as I head for the door, I see Robert come up out of the cellar, the axe in his hands. "This has to stop. This has to stop." He screams at me, and I very much agree, and if he were coming for me with that axe, all would be fine. I somehow always understood things might come to this juncture, but he sweeps past me and heads for the front door, and my grandchildren outside. I take a few quick steps, practically falling, and shove him away from the door. I see his hands fumble the axe, but I do not realize the danger until he hits the wall and screams, tumbles backwards, the blade buried in his chest. "Robert!" It's all I have time to say before Jackie comes out of the kitchen screeching, but it's all I know to say, really, and what good would it do to lose myself now? He would have hated to die from clumsiness, and that's what I take away from this house when I leave. Out on the lawn, the children are jumping up and down, laughing and crying. There is a moment in which time slows down, and I'm heartsick to see their tiny, perfect features shift, coursing, and flesh losing its elasticity and acquiring a dry, plastic filler look, as if they might become puppets, inanimate figures controlled by distant and rapidly vanishing souls. I see my little Evie's eyes dull into dark marbles, her slackened face and collapsing mouth spilling the dregs of her laughter. I think of Robert dead in the farmhouse, and what a mad and reprehensible thing it is to survive one's child. But of course I can't tell these children their father has died. Maybe later, but now, when they are like this, if I told them now, they might savage the little that remains of our pitiful world. In fact, I can't tell them anything I feel or know or see. "Help me find your grandmother," I shout. "She's gotten away from us, but I'm sure one of you clever children will find her." And I am relieved when they follow me out of the yard and into the edge of the woods. I have even more difficulty as I maneuver through the snarled tangle of undergrowth and fallen branches than I thought I would. I'm out of practice, and with every too wide step to avoid any obstacle, I'm sure I'm going to fall. But the children don't seem to mind our lack of progress. In fact, they already appear to have forgotten why we are out here. They range back and forth, their paths cross as they pretend to be bees or birds or low-flying aircraft. Periodically, they deliberately crash into each other, fall back against trees and bushes in dozens of feigned deaths. Sometimes they just break off to babble at each other, point at me and giggle, sharing secrets in their high-pitched alien language. Now and then I snatch glimpses of Lisa moving through the trees ahead of us, her blonde hair, her long legs, and once or twice just a bit of her face, and what might be a smile or a grimace I can't really tell from this distance. Seeing her in fragments like this, I can almost imagine her as the young athletic woman I met 50 years ago. So quick-witted, who enthralled me and frightened me and ran rings around me in more ways than one. But I know better. I know that that young woman exists more in my mind now than in hers. The other Alicia is now like some shattered carcass by the roadside, and what lives, what dances and races and gibbers mindlessly among the trees is a broken spirit that once inhabited that same beautiful body. Sometimes the death of who we've loved is but the final act in a grief that has lingered for years. I think that if Alicia were to embrace me now, she'd have half my face between her teeth before I had time even to speak her name. As mad as she, the children now shriek on either side of me, slap me on the side of the face, the belly, before they howl and run away. I wonder if they even remember who she is or was to them. How only a few years ago she made them things and cuddled them and sang them soft songs. But we were never meant to remember everything, I think, and that is a blessing. It seems they have already forgotten about their parents, except as a story they used to know. The young are always more interested in science fiction, those fantasy of days to come, especially if they can be the heroes. I watch them, or I avoid them, for much of the afternoon, like a babysitter who really doesn't want the job. At one point, they begin to fight over a huge burl on a tree about 3 feet off the ground. It is only the second such tree deformity I've ever seen, and by far the larger of the two. I understand that they come about when the younger tree is damaged and the tree continues to grow around the damage to create these remarkable patterns in the grain. Their argument is a strange one, although not that different from other arguments they've had. Evie says it'll make a perfect princess throne for her after they cut it down. The fact that they have no means to cut it down does not factor into the argument. Tom claims he saw it first, and although he has no idea what to do with it, the right to decide should be his. Eventually, they come to blows, both of them crying as they continue to pummel each other about the head and face. When they begin to bleed, I decide I have to do something. I have handled this badly, although I can't imagine that anyone else would know better how to handle such a crisis. I stare at them. Their flesh is running. Their flesh runs. Their grandmother is gone, and they don't even know that their father is dead, and they dream wide awake, and the flesh flows around them. What do I tell them? Do I reassure them with tales of heaven, that their father is now safe in heaven? Do I tell them that no matter what happens to their poor, fragile flesh, there is a safe place for them in heaven? What I want to tell them is that their final destination is not heaven, but memory. And you can make yourself a memory so profound that it transforms everything it touches. My Evie screams, her face a mask of blood, and Tom looks even worse. All I can see through the red confusion of his face is a single fixed eye. I try to run then to separate them, but I am so awkward and pathetic I fall into the brush and tangle below them, where I sprawl and cry out in sorrow and agony. Only then do they stop and they come to me, my grandchildren, to stare down at me silently, their faces solemn. Tom has wiped much of the blood from his face to reveal the scratches there, the long lines and the rough shapes like a child's awkward sketch. This is my legacy, I think. These are the ones who will keep me alive, if only as a memory poorly understood, or perhaps as a ghost too troublesome to fully comprehend. We try, but we cannot sculpt a shape out of what we've done in the world. Our hands cannot touch enough. Our words do not travel far enough. For all our constant waving, we still cannot be picked out of a crowd. My grandchildren approach for the end of my story. I can feel the terrible swiftness of my journey through their short lives. I become a voice clicking because it has run out of sound. I become a tongue silently flapping as it runs out of words. I become motionless as I can think of nowhere else to go. I become the stone and the plank and the empty field. I am really quite something. The monster made me in their image until I am scattered and forgotten. Chapter 6, Stephen Graham Jones. So the chapter is called Chapter 6 by Stephen Graham Jones. They were 80 miles from campus, if miles still mattered. It had been Dr. Orman's idea. Dr. Orman was Crane's dissertation director, if dissertations still mattered. They probably didn't. Zombies. Zombies were the main thing that mattered these days. Crane lowered his binoculars and turned to Dr. Orman. "They're still following 95, he said. "Path of least resistance," Dr. Orman said back. The clothes Crane and Dr. Orman were wearing they'd scavenged from a home that had had the floor flapping. The owners surely scavenged on themselves by now. Dr. Orman's hair was everywhere. The mad professor. Crane was wearing a paisley skirt as a cap. His idea was to break up the human form, present a less enticing silhouette. Dr. Orman said that was useless, that the zombies were obviously keying on vibrations in the ground. That was part of why they preferred the cities and probably had a lot to do with why they were sticking mostly to the asphalt now. They could hear better through it. Crane respectfully disagreed. They didn't prefer the cities, it was just that the zombie population was mimicking pre-plague concentrations. Whether walking or just lying there, you would expect the dead to be pretty much where they died, wouldn't you? Instead of entertaining the argument, Dr. Orman ended it by studying the horde through their one pair of binoculars and noting how, on asphalt, there was no cloud of dust to announce the zombies' presence. Sophisticated hunting techniques, a rudimentary sense of self and other. Do horde and herd share a root? Crane asked. He'd been tossing it back and forth in his head since the last exit. We use horde for invaders, Dr. Orman said in his thinking out loud voice. Mongols, for example. While herd is for ungulates, generally. Herd mentality, Dr. Orman said, handing the binoculars back. Herd suggests the lack of intelligence, of conscious thought, while horde brings with it aggressiveness, or at the very least a danger to the society naming those invaders. Then no, the two words only sounded similar. Crane could accept this, less because he had little invested in the shared etymology, more because the old patterns felt good, felt right. Teacher, student, each working toward a common goal. It was why they were here, 80 miles from campus. There had been families to return to, of course, but each being a commuter, their only course of action had been to hole up in the long basement under the anthropology building. The break room refrigerator could only sustain 2 people for so long, though. Crane tried to frame their situation as a return to more primitive times. What the plague was doing, it was resetting humanity. Hunting and gathering were the order of the day. Now, not books or degrees on the wall. Survival had become hand-to-mouth again. There was to be no luxury time for a generation or two. There would be no specializing, no social stratification. The idea of a barter economy springing up anytime soon was a lark. Tooth and nail was going to be the dominant mode for a while, and only the especially strong would make it through to breed, keep the species going. Dr. Orman had taken Crane's musing in as if they were idle ramblings. His eyes cast to the far wall, but then he had emerged from their latrine, the main office, 2 days later, with a decidedly intense cast to his features, his eyes nearly flashing with discovery. "What?" Crane had said, suddenly sure a window had been breached. "It does still matter," he said. "All our work, our studies, the graduate degrees. It's been a manual, a guide, don't you see?" Crane studied the map of Paleo-America and tacked on the wall and waited. This was Dr. Orman's style. "Your chapter 2, Dr. Orman went on. "That one footnote, it was in the formative part, the foundational prologue. The part I may have said felt strawmanish." "The name-dropping?" Crane filled in. Now that it was the post-apocalypse, they could call things what they were. "About the available sources of protein?" Crane narrowed his eyes, tried to feel back through his dissertation. Chapter 2 had been a textual wrestling match, no doubt. It was where he had to address all the mutually exclusive claims for why the various and competing contenders for the title of man on the African savannah had stood up, gone bipedal. Crane's thesis was that a lack of body hair due to forest retreat meant that the mothers were having to carry their infants now, instead of letting them hang on. They had no choice but to stand up. Part and parcel with this was the supposition that early man, a grand word for a curious ape with new wrist and pelvis morphology, was a persistence hunter, running its prey down over miles and days, running it to death. A lifestyle like this would require the whole troop. The proper word for a group of apes was a shrewdness, but Crane had always thought that a poor association for gamblers and inventors to be on the move. No posted guards, no beds, no return to, thus no babysitters like jackals had, like meerkats had, like nearly all the other mammalian societies had. This meant these early would-be humans had to take their babies with them each chase. They had to hold them close as they ran, hold them with hands they could no longer devote to running. It was elegant. As for how these mutant bipeds were able to persistence hunt so effectively, it was those unheralded, never-seen-before sweat glands, those cavernous lungs, the wide nostrils. What was nice for Crane's argument was that this was all work others had already done. All he had to do was, in Chapter 2, organize and cite, bow and nod. But this being anthropology and the fossil record being not just sparse but cruelly random, alternate theories, of course, abounded. One was the water ape hypothesis. We got the protein to nourish our growing brains and lengthen our bones from shellfish. Droughts drove us to the shores of Africa, and what initially presented itself as a hurdle became a stepping stone. Another theory was that our brains grew as self-defense mechanisms against the up and down climate. Instead of being allowed to specialize, we had to become generalists, opportunists, our brains having to constantly improvise and consider options, and in doing so, that accidentally give birth to conceptual thought. Another theory was that that source of brain-growing protein had been on the savannah all along. Another theory, 2 days after Dr. Orman's eureka moment, Crane shouldered open the door to their basement for the last time, and they went in search of a horde. It didn't take long. As Crane had noted, the pre-apocalypse population of their part of New Hampshire had already been dense. It stood to reason that it still would be. Dr. Orman shrugged it off in that way he had that meant their sample was too limited in scope, that further studies would prove him out. To his more immediate academic satisfaction, though Crane could feel it wafting off him, when a horde presented itself on the second day, the smell the two of them were able to hide not in a closet, vibration-conducting concrete foundation, or under a car, asphalt, but in a shrub. The comparatively loose soil saved them, evidently, hid the pounding of their hearts. Maybe. The horde had definitely shuffled past anyway, unaware of the meal waiting just within arm's reach. Once it had been gone half a day, Crane and Dr. Orman rose, scavenged the necessities and necessary clothes, and followed. As Crane had footnoted in the chapter 2 of his dissertation, and as Dr. Orman had predicted in a way that brooked no objection, the top predators in any ecosystem, they pull all the meat from their prey and move on, leaving niches to be filled by the more opportunistic. In Africa, now, that was hyenas using their powerful jaws to crack into gazelle bones for the marrow locked inside. 6 million years ago, man had been that hyena. Skulking at the fringes has its benefits, Dr. Orman had said. In this case, those fringes were just far enough behind the horde that the corpses it left behind wouldn't be too far into decay yet. I-95 was littered with the dead. The dead, Crane christened them, as opposed to the other kind. A field of skeletons, skewned with meat and flies, the bones scraped by hundreds of teeth, then discarded. Crane and Dr. Orman had stood over corpse after corpse. Theory was one thing. Practice was definitely another. And they talked about it, keeping their voices low, even the ones with enough meat hidden on the buttocks or calf to provide a meal of sorts. Still, that meat was more than likely infected, wasn't it? Their job as survivors now, it was to go deeper than that infection. This is how you prove a thesis. Once it was dark enough that they could pretend not to see, not to know, they used a rock to crack open the tibia of what had once been a healthy man, by all indications. They covered his face with Crane's cape and then covered it again with a stray jacket. Modern sensibilities, Dr. Orman narrated. Our ancestors would have had no such qualms. If they were our ancestors, Crane said, something dark rising in his throat. He tamped it down just. The marrow had the consistency of bubble gum meant for blowing bubbles. After you've chewed it through half the movie, there was a granular quality, a warmth, but no real cohesion anymore. Not quite a slurry or a paste. More like an oyster just starting to decompose. Instead of plundering the bone for every thick, willing drop, they each took a meager mouthful, closed their eyes, and swallowed. Neither threw it up. Late into the night, then, they talked about how, when man had been living on marrow like this, if he had been, Dr. Orman allowed, as 1 mil, doesn't an argument prove, this had of course been well before the discovery and implementation of fire. And fire, of course, was what made the meat they ate easier to digest. Thus, their guts had been able to shrink. That's what I'm saying, Crane said, piggybacking on what was becoming Dr. Orman's research. Persistence hunters. You're still attached to the romantic image of them, Dr. Orman said, studying something under his fingernail, the moonlight not quite playing along. You have this image of a Zulu warrior, I think, tall, lean. No, he's Ethiopian, isn't he? What was that Olympic runner's name who ran barefoot? A lot of them do, Crane said, staring off into the trees. But can we digest this, do you think? He said, touching his stomach to show. We have to, Dr. Orman said. And so they did, always staying half a day behind the horde, tipping the leg bones up for longer and longer droughts, drinking from the tanks of toilets they found along the way, fashioning turbans from scraps. The smarter among the crows began to follow them, to pick at these splintered open bones. Niches and valleys, Dr. Orman said, walking backwards to watch the big black birds. Host parasite, Crane said, watching ahead through the binoculars. And what do you think we are? Dr. Orman called gleefully. Crane didn't answer. The zombies at the back of the horde, Crane still preferred herd in the privacy of his head. He'd taken to naming them the way a primatologist might name chimpanzees from the troop she was observing. There was Draggy, and Face Begone, and Left Arm Flannel, Flannel and Blind Eye, and Soup. By the time they got to the horde's victims, there was rarely anything left but the bones with their precious marrow that Dr. Orman so needed to prove Crane's second chapter was in need of overhaul, if not reconception altogether. That night, over a second tibia he'd taken to holding like a champagne flute, Dr. Orman somehow affected a cigar with his illness. Crane posed the question to Dr. Orman. If a species, us, back then, adapts itself to persistence hunting, if, Dr. Orman emphasized, if we were adapting like that, then why didn't the prey one-up us? Silence from the other side of what would have been the campfire if they allowed themselves fires, if they needed to cook their food. These were primitive times, though. In the darkness, Dr. Orman's eyes sparked. Gazelles that can sweat through their skin, you mean, he said. The better to slip our grass, the better to run for miles. The marathon gazelle? Crane added. Do we know they didn't? Dr. Orman asked, and somehow in the asking, in the tone, Crane sensed that Dr. Orman was forever objecting, not to him, Crane, or to whatever text he was engaging, whatever panel he was attending, but to someone in his life who called him by his first name, whatever that was. It was an unasked-for insight. Dr. Crane? Dr. Orman prompted. This was the classroom again. Crane nodded, caught up. What if the gazelles of today are in comparison to the gazelles of 6 million years ago? Marathon gazelles, right? Excellent. Crane shook his head. What he hoped was an imperceptible bit. Do you think that's the case? He asked. Were we that persistent a hunter? It's your thesis, Mr. Crane. Crane gathered his words. He'd been running through his argument all day, and Dr. Orman had stepped right into the snare. Said, as if reluctantly, as if only just thinking of this. You forget that our persistence had rewards, I think. It had a surely you jest rhythm to it that Crane liked. It was like speaking Shakespeare off the cuff by accident, by natural talent. Rewards? Dr. Orman asked. We persistence hunted until that gave us enough protein to develop the necessary brain capacity to communicate. And once we started to communicate, tricks of the trade started to get passed down. Thus was born culture. We graduated out of the gazelle race before the gazelles could adapt. For long, delicious moments, there was silence from the other side of the non-campfire. Has the student become the master? Crane said to himself. Does the old silverback reconsider in the face of youth? He was so tired of eating stupid marrow. Just when it seemed Dr. Orman must have retreated into sleep or the understandable pretense of it, this was a new world, requiring new and uncomfortable thinking. He chuckled in the darkness. Dr. Orman. Crane bored his eyes into him, not having to mask his contempt. Is that how man is, in your estimation? Dr. Orman asked. Or, I should say, is that how man has proven himself to be over his short tenure at the top of the food chain? Crane didn't say anything. Dr. Orman didn't need him to. Say you're right, or in the general area of right, persistence hunting gave us big brains, which gave us language, which gave us culture. Chapter 6, Crane said. When I got to it, I mean. Yes, as is always the case, but humor me aloud, if you will. Consider this your defense. Our ancient little grandfathers able to sweat, lungs made for distance, bipedalistic for efficiency, their infants cradled in arms, not having to grasp at hair like common chimpanzees. I never, of course, but allowing all this, if we were so successful, evolving in leaps and bounds, tell me then why are there still gazelles today? Agriculture and the fabled oryx are still thousands of generations away here. What's to stop us from plundering the most available food source unto exhaustion? Time slowed for Crane. You can't ever completely eradicate a species? Orman completed, his tone carrying the obvious objection. Not that I disagree about us moving on to other food sources eventually, but only when necessary, Mr. Crane. Only when pressed. Chapter 6, Crane managed. Pardon? I would have addressed this in Chapter 6. Good. Perhaps tomorrow you can detail how, for me, if you don't mind. Sure, Crane said, and should I just keep calling you Doctor? Another chuckle, as if this question had already been anticipated as well. Abel, Dr. Orman said, after my father. Abel, Crane repeated. Crane and Abel. Close, Dr. Orman said, dismissing this conversation, and then cleared his throat for sleep, as was his practice, and in his mind's eye, Crane could see the two of them from above, their backs to each other, one with his eyes shut contentedly, the other staring out into the night. Instead of outlining Chapter 6 the next day, Crane kept the binoculars to his face. If he remembered correctly, 95 crossed another major highway soon. Would the herd split, wandering down separate ways, or would they mill around indecisively until some Moses among them made the necessary decision? It was going to be interesting. He might write a paper on it if paper still mattered. And then they walked up on the most recent group of victims. They'd been hiding in an RV, it looked like. It was as good as anywhere, Crane supposed. No hiding place or perfect fortress really worked. It looked like this group had finally made their big run for it. The RV's front tires were gummed up with zombies. They'd had no choice but to run, really. It was always all that was left right at the end. They made it about the usual distance, 30 feet. They'd been gnawing down to the bone in places, of course. If they ever figure out there's a Morrow in there, Dr. Orman said, lowering himself to a likely arm, its tendons bare to the sun for the first time. They don't have language, Crane said. It would just be one knowing, not all of them. Assuming they speak as you and I do, of course, Dr. Orman said, wrenching the forearm up. The harsh creaking sound kick-started another sound. In a hiking backpack lying across the center stripe, there was what could only be an infant. When it cried, it was definitely an infant. Crane looked at Dr. Orman, and Dr. Orman looked ahead of them. "It's right on the asphalt," Dr. Orman said, his tone making this an emergency. "They go by smell," Crane said, "or sound, just normal sound, not conductive." "This is not an argument either of us wants to win," Dr. Orman said, stepping neatly over to the backpack and leaning forward onto it with both knees. The crying muffled. "We're reenactors," he said while doing it, while killing this baby. "My brother-in-law was a Civil War soldier on weekends, but this is so much more important, an ancient script, you could say, one written by the environment, by biology, inscribed in our very instincts." Crane watched and listened, his own plundered tibia held low along his right leg. Soon enough, the cries ceased. "You can test your theory about methods of child transport later," Dr. Orman said, rising up to drive his knees down one last terrible time. For emphasis, it seemed. "That was probably Adam," Crane said, looking down at the quiet lump in the backpack. "If you believe the children's stories," Dr. Orman said, casting around his ulna, he claimed their flavor was slightly headier. That it had something to do with the pendulum motion they'd been subjected to, with a lifetime of walking, that resulted in more nutrients getting trapped in the lower arms. Crane didn't care. He was still staring at the rapsy blue fabric of the backpack, and then he looked up the road as well. Left arm was watching them. He'd come back. The sound had traveled along the asphalt ribbon of 95 and found him, bringing up the rear of the horde. It hadn't been scent or pressure waves in the air anyway. The wind was in Crane's face, was lifting his ragged cape behind him. So Orman was right. Crane looked across to him, one foot planted on a dead wrist, his chicken elbows cocked back, trying to decenter the ulna from its double helix soul weight of a radius. "You're right," Crane said across to him. Dr. Orman raised his face, waited for the punchline. "About how they hear," Crane said, pointing with his chin down 95. Left arm was still 2 or 3 car lengths from Dr. Orman. Dr. Orman flinched back, tangled in the legs of the woman whose marrow he was plundering. "I got it," Crane said, and stepped forward past Dr. Orman, and when he was close enough, timing it after a clumsy left arm swipe, he planted the sole of his boot in left arm's chest, sent him tumbling, then stepped in neatly to finish it with a tibia as hammer, as axe, as tool. It made his arm feel floppy and chimp-like, as if unaccustomed, as if only using this long bone from sudden, forgettable inspiration. "Not very persistent after all, are they?" Dr. Orman said, from his corpse. Crane looked back to Dr. Orman about this, and then down to left arm. Right beside him was one of the plundered, the dead, the feasted on, the dead. Crane lowered himself to this clean corpse to salvage what he could, pockets first, then the bones for marrow, and found himself holding left arm, just to move it away, off. But then he pulled on it instead, because zombies are already decomposing. It came off at the shoulder. Crane studied it. Not very persistent, are they? And finally nodded to himself, reached through the rancid meat for the bone, and liberated it. The brittle end snapped off under his thumb like a Pez dispenser. There was still marrow inside. Crane considered it. Not very persistent, are they? Finally nodded to himself. You still into Olmas? He cried across to Dr. Orman. Give them a chance, Dr. Orman said back, not bothered to turn around. Here, Crane said, walking left arm's ulna across, careful not to tip the syrupy marrow out. I broke it already, sorry. I really shouldn't, Dr. Orman said, smiling, taking the ulna between his fingers. Male or female? He asked. He was keeping track, like it mattered. Male, Crane said, living the truth of it, and watched Dr. Orman tip the broken end of the bone into his mouth. Dr. Orman had already swallowed by the time the taste registered. He fell to his knees coughing, trying to puke. Crane pinched his pants up at the thighs to squat down, say it right to Dr. Orman. We're not bone suckers, Doctor. We're persistence hunters. I think you'll come to agree with me here shortly. Dr. Orman tried to respond but could only sputter and gag, swing his arm back and forth for Crane's pants leg. He was already changing. Then, this can be Chapter 6, Crane said. That sound good to you, sir? Dr. Orman's head bobbed with his regurgitation efforts, with his transformation, with his inevitable acquiescence, not just to the virus, but to the strength of Crane's argument. Chapter 6, then. It was going to be perfect. Crane stood, turned to survey his options. 80 miles behind him was the campus, with all its vending machines, all its dorm room toilets to drink from, all its concrete and asphalt stretched tight like an eardrum. The woods, then, back to the trees. The soft earth, where there wouldn't transmit his location to the herd to any stragglers. In this particular reenactment, Crane was to be prey, he knew. Behind him, the all-too-human horde exhausting the landscape. This was his thesis in action, his final proof. He smiled to himself, if smiles still mattered, and was flipping a coin in his head. Trees to the east or trees to the west? When the blue backpack pulled his attention over, the lump was gently kicking, a small fist pushing against the fabric. The baby, more resilient than Dr. Orman had thought, more human. Crane turned to Dr. Orman, already trying to figure out how to stand again into this new world. Maybe 15 seconds, then 10 to be safe. Crane ran to the backpack, grabbed the infant up. A girl. Oh, Eve, he said, and pulled her to his chest, one of her arms more floppy than it should have been, the ribs on the side dangerously concave, but the other one was working fine. She mewled, was building to a scream. Crane chose the side of the road where the trees were closest. Crossing the ditch, the infant held tight in both arms because he didn't have close to enough body hair for her to clutch onto it with her tiny little right hand. Crane shook his head to clear the sweat from his eyes. The gazelles did learn to perspire, he said in his head to Dr. Orman, shuffling into place behind him, and the race, it was on. It had never really ended, not since those first delicate steps 6 million years ago. In a Cavern in a Canyon by Laird Barron. Husband number one fondly referred to me as the Good Samaritan. Anything from a kid lost in the neighborhood to a countrywide search and rescue effort, I got involved. If we drove past a fender bender, I had to stop and lend a hand or snap a few pictures, maybe do a walk around of the scene. A major crash? Forget about it. I'd haunt the side until the cows came home or the cops shooed me away. It took the better part of a decade for the light bulb to flash over my hubby's bald head. He realized I wasn't a Samaritan so much as a fetishist. Wormed down in the end, and he bailed. I'm still melancholy over that one. Lucky for him, he didn't suffer through my stint with the Park Service in Alaska. After college and the first kid, I finagled my way onto the government payroll and volunteered for every missing person, lost climber, downed plane, or wrecked boat scenario. I hiked and camped on the side, left my compass and maps at home. I wanted to disappear. Longest I managed was 4 days. The feds were suspicious enough to send me to a shrink who knew his business. The boys upstairs gave me a generous severance check and said to not let the door hit me on the ass on my way out. Basically, the beginning of a long downward slide in my life. Husband number 3 divorced me for my 54th birthday. I pawned everything that wouldn't fit into a van and drove from Ohio back home to Alaska. I rented a double wide at the Cottonwood Point Trailer Park near Moose Pass, 2 miles along the bucolic and winding seaward highway from Cassie, my youngest daughter. A spruce forest crowds the back door. Moose nibble the rhododendron, hedging the yard. Most folks tuck in for the night by the time Colbert is delivering his monologue. Cassie drops off my infant granddaughter, Vera, 2 or 3 times a week or whenever she can't find a sitter. Single and working 2 jobs, hardware cashier by day, graveyard security at the port of Seward Wednesday and Friday. Cassie avoided the inevitability of divorce by not getting married in the first place. She kept the dumb, virile fisherman who knocked her up as baby daddy and strictly part-time squeeze. Wish I had thought of that. Once I realized that my nanny gig was a regular thing, I ordered a crib and inveigled the handsome and generally drunken, alas, fellow at 213 to set it up in my bedroom. On the nanny evenings, I feed Vera her bottle and watch westerns on cable. Get you started right, I say to her as Bronson ventilates Fonda beneath a glaring sun, or when a cowboy rides into the red and gold distance as the credits roll. She'll be a tomboy like her gran if I have any influence. The classic stars were my heroes once upon a time. Stewart, Van Cleef, Wayne, and Marvin. During my youth, I utterly revered Eastwood. I crushed big time on The Man with No Name and Dirty Harry. Kept a poster from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly in my bedroom on my wall. So young, both of us, so innocent. Except for the shooting and murdering and my lustful thoughts, but you know. Around midnight, I awake from a nap on the couch to Vera's plaintive cry. She's in the bedroom crib, awake and pissed for her bottle. The last act of High Plains Drifter plays in scratchy 1970s Technicolor. It's the part where the stranger finally gets around to exacting righteous vengeance. Doesn't matter that I've missed 2 rapes, a horsewhipping, Lago painted red and renamed Hell. All those images are imprinted upon my hindbrain. I get the impression the scenes are always rolling down there against the screen of my subconscious. I am depressed to recognize a cold fact in this instant. The love affair with bad boy Clint ended years and years ago, even if I haven't fully accepted the reality. Eyes gummed with sleep, I sit for a few seconds, mesmerized by the stricken faces of the townspeople, who were caught between a vicious outlaw gang and a stranger hell-bent on retribution. The stranger's whip slithers through the salon window and garrots an outlaw. I've watched that scene on a dozen occasions. My hands shake and I can't zap it with a remote fast enough. That solves one problem. I take the formula from the fridge and pop it into the fancy warmer Cassie obtained during the clearance sale. The LED numerals are counting down to nothing when it occurs to me that I don't watch the baby on Sundays. The night in 1977 that my father disappeared, he, Uncle Ned, and I drove north along Midnight Road, searching for Tony Orlando. Dad crept the Fleetwood at a walking pace. My younger siblings, Doug, Shauna, and Artemis, remained at home. Doug was ostensibly keeping an eye on our invalid grandmother, but I figured he was probably glued to the television with the others. That autumn sticks in my memory like mud to a Wellington. We were 16, 14, 11, and 10, babes in the wilderness. Uncle Ned and I took turns yelling out the window whenever Orlando pulled his stunt. Dad swore it would be the last expedition he mounted to retrieve the damned mutt. I guess he really meant it. Middle school classmate Nancy Albrecht once asked me what the hell kind of name was that for a dog, and I said, Mom and Dad screwed on the second date to Halfway to Paradise, and if you laugh, I'll smack your teeth down your throat. I have a few scars on my knuckles, for damn sure. Way back then, we lived in Eagle Talon, Alaska, an isolated port about 70 miles southwest of Anchorage. Cruise ships bloated to town with tourists during spring, and it dried up to around 300 resident souls come autumn. Eastern settlers had carved a hamlet from wilderness during the 1920s, plunked it down in a forgotten vale populated by eagles, bears, drunk teamsters, and drunker fishermen. Mountains and dense forest on three sides formed a deep-water harbor. The channel curved around the flank of Eagle Mountain and eventually led into Prince William Sound. Roads were gravel or dirt. We had the cruise ships and barges. We also had the railroad. You couldn't make a movie without stepping in seagull shit. Most of us townies lived in a 14-story apartment complex called the Fraser Estate. We kids shortened it to Fate. Terra Incognita began where the sodium lamplight grew fuzzy. At night, wolves howled in the nearby hills. Definitely not the dream hometown of a 16-year-old girl. As a grown woman, I recall it with a bittersweet fondness. Upon commencing the hunt for Orlando, whom my little brother Doug had stupidly set free from the leash only to watch in mortification as the dog trotted into the sunset, tail furled with rebellious intent, Dad faced a choice. Head west along the road or troll the beach where the family pets sometimes mined for rotten salmon carcasses. We picked the road because it wound into the woods and our shepherd-husky mix hankered after the red squirrels that swarmed during the fall. Dad didn't want to walk if he could avoid it. "March, Dad, dang plenty in the court," he said. It had required a major effort for him to descend to the parking garage and get the wagon started and pointed in the general direction of our search route. 2 bad knees, pain pills for said knees, and half-pack-a-day habit had all but done him in. Too bad for Uncle Ned and me. Midnight Road petered out in the foothills. Moose trails went every which way from the little clearing where we'd parked next to an abandoned Winnebago with a raggedy tarp covering the front end and the black garbage bags over the windows. Hobos and druggies occasionally used the Winnebago as a fort until Sheriff Lockhart came along to roust them. "Goddamn railroad," Dad would say, despite the fact that if not for the railroad, for which he performed part-time labor to supplement his military checks, and the cruise ships and barges, there wouldn't be any call for equal talent whatsoever. Uncle Ned lifted himself from the back seat and accompanied me as I shined the flashlight and hollered for Orlando. Dad remained in the station wagon with the engine running and the lights on. He honked the horn every couple of minutes. "He's gonna keep doing that, huh?" Uncle Ned wasn't exactly addressing me, more like an actor musing to himself on the stage. "Just gonna keep leaning on that horn every 10 seconds. The horn blared again, farther off and dim. We'd come a ways already. Birch and alder were broken by stands of furry black spruce that muffled sounds from the outside world. The black, green, and gray webbing is basically the Spanish moss of the Arctic. Uncle Ned chuckled and shook his head. 2 years, Dad's junior and a major league stoner. He'd managed to keep it together when it counted. He taught me how to tie a knot, paddle a canoe, and gave me a lifetime supply of dirty jokes. He'd also explained that, contrary to Dad's Cro-Magnon take on teenage dating, boys were okay to fool around with so long as I ducked the bad ones and avoided getting knocked up. Which ones were bad, I wondered. Most of them according to the Book of Ned, but keep it to fooling around and all would be well. He also clued me in to the fact that Dad's vow to blast any would-be suitor's pecker off with his 12-gauge was an idle threat. My old man couldn't shoot worth spit, even when sober. The trail forked. One path climbed into the hills, where the undergrowth thinned. The other path curved deeper into the creepy spruce, where somebody had strung blue reflective tape among the branches. A haphazard mess like the time Dad got lit up and tried to decorate the Christmas tree. "Let's not go in there," Uncle Ned said, ominous, although not entirely unusual, as he often said that kind of thing with a similar laconic dryness. "That bar looks rough. Let's try the next one over. That woman looks like my ex-wife. I'm not going to dance with her, That box has got to be heavy. Let's get a beer and think on it." "Maybe he's at the beach rolling in crap," I said. Orlando loved bear turds and rotten salmon guts with a true passion. There'd be plenty of both near the big water, and as I squinted into the forbidding shadows, I increasingly wished we'd driven there instead. Uncle Ned pulled his coat tighter and lit a cigarette. The air had dampened. I yelled, "Orlando!" a few more times. Then we stood there for a while in the silence. It was like listening through the lid of a coffin. Dad had stopped leaning on the horn. The woodland critters weren't making their usual fuss. Clouds drifted in, and the darkness was so complete it wrapped us in a cocoon. "Think Orlando's at the beach?" I said. "Well, I don't know. He ain't here." "Orlando, you stupid jerk!" I shouted to the night in general. "Let's boogie," Uncle Ned said. The cherry of his cigarette floated in midair and gave his narrowed eyes a feral glint. Like Dad, he was middling tall and rangy, sharp-featured and often wry. He turned and moved the way we'd come. He'd lowered, trailing a streamer of Pall Mall smoke. Typical of my uncle. Once he made a decision, he acted. "Damn it, Orlando!" I gave up and followed, sick to my gut with worry. Full dog would be the death of me, or so I suspected. He'd tangled with a porcupine the summer before, and I'd spent hours picking quills from his swollen snout because Dad refused to take him in to see Doc Green. There were worse things than porcupines in these woods. Black bears, angry moose, wolves, and I feared my precious idiot would run into one of them. Halfway back to the car, I glimpsed a patch of white to my left amidst a heavy brush. I took it for a birch stump with holes rotted into the heartwood. No, it was a man lying on his side, matted black hair framing his pale face. By pale, I mean bone white and bloodless. The face you see on the corpse of an outlaw in those old-timey Wild West photographs. "Help me," he whispered. I turned my light on the injured man. He had to be hurt because of the limp, contorted angle of his body, his shocking paleness. He seemed familiar. The lamp beam broke around his body like a stream splints around a large stone. The shadows turned slowly, fracturing and changing him. He might have been Weirdo Floyd who swept the caribou after last call, or that degenerate trapper, Bob something, who lived in a shack in the hills with a bunch of stuffed moose heads and mangy beaver hides. Or it might have been, as I first thought, a tree stump, lent a man's shape by my lying eyes. The more I stared, the less certain I became that it was a person at all. Except I'd heard him speak, raspy and high-pitched from pain, almost a falsetto. 25 feet, give or take, between me and the stranger. I didn't see his arm move. Move it did, however. The shadow shifted again, and his hand grasped futilely thin and gnarled as a tree branch. His misery radiated into me, caused my eyes to well with tears of empathy. I felt terrible, just terrible. I wanted to mother him, and took a step toward him. "Hortense, come here." Uncle Ned said my name, the way Dad described talking to his wounded buddies in Nam, the ones who'd gotten hit by a grenade or a stray bullet. Quiet, calm, and reassuring was the ticket, and I bet his tone would have worked its magic if my insides had happened to be splashed on the ground and the angels were singing me home. In this case, Uncle Ned's unnatural calmness scared me, woke me from a dream where I heroically tended a hapless stranger, got a parade and a key to the village, my father's grudging approval. "Hortense, please." "There's a guy in the bushes," I said. "I think he's hurt." Uncle Ned grabbed my hand like he used to when I was a little girl and towed me along at a brisk pace. "Nah, kid, that's a tree stump. I saw it when we went past earlier. Keep moving." I didn't ask why we were in such a hurry. It worried me how easy it seemed for him and Dad to slip into warrior mode at the drop of a hat. He muttered something about branches snapping and that black bears roamed the area as they fattened up for winter, and he regretted leaving his guns at the house. House is sort of a grand term. Uncle Ned lived in a mobile home on the edge of the village. The estate didn't appeal to his loner sensibilities. We got to walking so fast along that narrow trail that I twisted my ankle on a root and nearly went for a header. Uncle Ned didn't miss a beat. He took most of my weight upon his shoulder, pretty much dragged me back to the Fleetwood. The engine ran and the driver's side door was ajar. I assumed Dad had gone behind a tree to take a leak. As the minutes passed and we called for him, I began to understand that he left. Those were the days when men abandoned their families by saying they needed to grab a pack of cigarettes and beating it from the high timber. He threatened to do it during his frequent arguments with Mom. She'd beaten him to the punch and jumped ship with a traveling salesman, leaving us to fend for ourselves. Maybe, just maybe, it was Dad's turn to bail on us kids. Meanwhile, Orlando had jumped into the open door and curled into a ball on the passenger seat. Leaves, twigs, and dirt plastered him. A pig digging for china wouldn't have been any filthier. Damned old dog pretended to sleep. His thumping toe gave away the show, though. Once, Ned roused him and tried to put him on Dad's trail. Nothing doing. Orlando whined and hung his head. He refused to budge despite Uncle Ned's exhortations. Finally, the dog yelped and scrambled back into the car, trailing a stream of piss. That was our cue to depart. Uncle Ned drove back to the Fraser estate. He called Deputy Clausen. Everybody called him Claus, and explained the situation. Claus agreed to gather a few men and do a walkthrough of the area. He theorized that Dad had gotten drunk and wandered into the hills and collapsed somewhere. Such events weren't rare. Meanwhile, I checked in on Grandma, who'd occupied the master bedroom since she'd suffered the aneurysm. Next, I herded Orlando into the bathroom and soaked him in the tub. He was really hurting by then. When I thanked Uncle Ned, he nodded curtly and avoided meeting my eye. "Lock the door," he said. "Why? The JWs aren't allowed out of the compound after dark." Whenever I got scared, I cracked wise. "Don't be a smartass. Lock the fucking door." "Something fishy in Denmark," I said to Orlando, who leaned against my leg as I threw the deadbolt. Mrs. Wells had assigned Hamlet, Julius Caesar, and Titus Andronicus for summer reading. And it's the Ides of August, too. My brothers and sisters sprawled in the living room in front of the TV, watching a vampire flick. Christopher Lee wordlessly seduced a buxom chick who was practically falling out of her peasant blouse. Lee angled for a bit, then he saw, nestled in the woman's cleavage, the teeny, elegant crucifix her archaeologist boyfriend had given her for luck. Lee's eyes went buggy with rage and fear. The vampire equivalent to blue balls, I guess. I took over Dad's lazy boy and kicked back with a bottle of Coke. The last one, as noted by the venomous glares on my siblings, and a bag of ice on my puffy ankle. The movie ended and I clapped my hands and sent the kids packing. At 3 bedrooms, our apartment qualified as an imperial suite. Poor Dad sacked out on the couch. Doug and Artemis shared the smallest, crappiest room. I bunked with Shauna, the princess of Jibber Jabber. She loved and feared me, and that made tight quarters a bit easier because she knew I'd sock her in the arm if she sassed me too often or pestered me with one too many goober questions. Often she'd natter on while I piped Fleetwood Mac and Led Zeppelin through the set of gigantic yellow earphones. That self-isolation spared us a few violent interior scenes, I'm sure. Amid the grumbles and the rush for the toilet, I almost confessed the weird events of the evening to Doug. My kid brother had an open mind when it came to the unknown. He wouldn't necessarily laugh me out of the room without giving the matter some real thought. Instead, I smacked the back of his head and told him not to be such a dumbass with Orlando. Nobody remarked on Dad's absence. I'm sure they figure he'd pitched camp at the Caribou like he did so many nights. Later, I lay awake and listened to my siblings snore. Orlando whined as he dreamed of the chase or of being chased. From the bedroom, Graham said in a fragile sing-song tone, "In a cavern, in a canyon, excavating for a mine, built a miner 49er and his daughter Clementine. In a cavern, in a canyon, in a cavern, in a canyon, in a cavern, in a canyon, Clementine, 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 Clementine." Of the 4 Shaw siblings, I was the eldest, tallest, and surliest. According to Mom, Dad had desperately wanted a boy for his firstborn. He descended from a lineage that adhered to a pseudo-medieval mindset. The noble chauvinist, the virtuous warrior, the honorable fighter of rearguard actions. Quaint when viewed through a historical lens, a real pain in the ass in the modern world. I was a disappointment. As a daughter, what else could I be? He got used to it. The Shaws have a long, long history of losing. We own that shit. "Go down fighting" would have been our family motto, with a snake biting the heel that crushed its skull as our crest. As some consolation, I was always a tomboy and tougher than either of my brothers. A heap tougher than most of the boys in our hick town, and tougher than at least a few of the grown men. Toughness isn't always measured by how hard you punch. Sometimes, most of the time, it's simply the set of a girl's job. I shot my mouth off with the best of them. If nothing else, I dutifully struck at the heels of my oppressors. Know where I got this grit? Sure as hell not from Dad. Oh yeah, he threw a nasty left hook, and he'd scragged a few guys in the wars, but until Mom had flown the coop, she ruled our roost with an iron fist that would have made Khrushchev think twice before crossing her. Yep, the meanness in my soul is pure D-Mom. Dad had all the homespun pathogens. He often said, never try to beat a man at what he does. What Dad did best was drink. He treated it as a competitive event. In addition to chugging Molson Export, Wild Turkey, and Absolute, Dad also smoked the hell out of cannabis whenever he could get his hands on some. He preferred the heavy-hitting bud from Mexico courtesy of Uncle Ned. I got my hands on a bag those old boys stashed in a rolled-up sock and a number 10 coffee can. That stuff sent you all right, although, judging by the wildness of Dad's eyes, the way they started and stared at the corners of the room after they'd had a few hits, his destination was way different than mine. Even so, the Acapulco Gold gave me a peek through the keyhole into Dad's soul in a way booze couldn't. Some blood memory got activated that might have been our sole point of commonality. He would have beaten me to a pulp if he'd known, for my own good, natch. Main thing I took from growing up, the daughter of an alcoholic, lots of notions compete for the top spot. The easiest way to get vomit and blood out of fabric, the best apologies, the precise amount of heat to pay a drunken diatribe, when the duck-flung bottles, how to balance a checkbook, and cook a family meal between homework, dog walking, and giving sponge baths to Graham. But above all, my essential takeaway was that I'd never go down the rabbit hole to an eternal happy hour. I indulged in a beer here and there, toked some Mary Jane to reward myself for serving as Mom, Dad, chief cook, and bottle washer pro tem. Nothing heavy, though. I resolved to leave the heavy lifting to Dad, Uncle Ned, and their buddies at the Caribou Tavern. Randall Shaw retired from the USMC in 1974 after 20 years of active service. Oorah! Retirement didn't agree with him, to wit, the beer, bourbon, and weed, and the sullen hurling of empties. It didn't agree with Mom either, obviously. My grandmother, Harriet Shaw, suffered a brain aneurysm that very autumn. Granddad passed away the previous winter and Graham moved into our apartment. By day, she slumped in a special medical recliner we bought from Eagle Talon Emergency Trauma Center. Vivian from upstairs sat with her while I was at school. Graham's awareness came and went like a bad radio signal. Sometimes she'd make a feeble attempt to play cards with Vivian. Occasionally, she asked about my grades and what cute boys I'd met, or she'd watch TV and chuckle at the soaps in that rueful way she laughed at so many ridiculous things. The clarity became rare. Usually she stared out the window at the harbor or at the framed Georgia O'Keeffe knockoff print of a sunflower above the dresser. Hours passed and we'd shoo away the mosquitoes while she tunelessly hummed, "In a cavern, in a canyon, excavating for mine," in a loop. There may as well have been a vacancy sign blinking above her head. After school and twice daily on weekends, Doug helped bundle Graham into the crappy fold-up chair and I pushed her around the village. Took her down to the wharf to watch the seagulls or parked her in front of the general store while I bought Dad a pack of smokes and another for myself. By night, Dad or I pushed the button to let the air out and she lay with her eyes fixed on the dented ceiling of the bedroom. She'd sigh heavily and say, "Nighty-night, nighty-night," like a parrot. It shames me to remember her that way, but then most of my childhood is a black hole. The search party found neither hide nor hair of Dad. Deputy Clausen liked Uncle Ned well enough and agreed to do a bigger sweep in the afternoon. The deputy wasn't enthused. Old Harmon Snodgrass, a trapper from Kabuk, isolated footprints in the soft dirt along the edge of the road. The tracks matched Dad's boots and were headed toward town. Snodgrass lost after a couple 100 yards. In Deputy Clausen's professional opinion, Randall Shaw had doubled back and flown the coupe to parts unknown, as a certain kind of man is wont to do when the going gets tough. Uncle Ned socked him, the Shaw answer to critics, and Claus would have had his ass in a cell for a good long time except Stu Herring, the mayor of our tiny burg, and Kyle Lomax were on hand to break up the festivities and soothe bruised egos. Herring sent Uncle Ned home with a go and sin no more scowl. "How's Mom?" Uncle Ned stared at Gran, staring at a spot on the wall. He sipped the vilest black coffee on the face of the earth. My specialty. I'd almost tripped over him in the hallway on my way to take Orlando from his morning stroll. He'd spent the latter portion of the night curled near our door, a combat knife in his fist. Normally, one might consider that loony behavior. You had to know Uncle Ned. "She's groovy as ever. Why are you lurking?" The others were still zonked, thank God. I hadn't an inkling of how to break the news of Dad's defection to them. I packed more ice onto my ankle. My foot had swollen to the point where it wouldn't fit into my sneaker. It really and truly hurt. Ow! "Let's go. Hospital time." He stood abruptly and went in, and woke Doug told him, "Drop your cock and grab your socks. You're man of the house for an hour. Orlando needs a walk. For the love of God, keep him on a leash, will ya?" Then he nabbed Dad's keys and took me straight away to the Eagle Clinic. Mrs. Cooper, a geriatric hypochondriac, saw the RN, Sally Mackey, ahead of us, and we knew from experience that it would be a hell of a wait. So Uncle Ned and I settled into hard plastic waiting room chairs. He lit a cigarette and another for me and said, "Okay, I got a story. Don't tell your man I told you, or he'll kick my ass, and then I'll kick yours, yeah?" I figured it would be a story of his hippie escapades or some raunchy bullshit Dad got up to in Vietnam. A tale to cheer me up and take my mind off my troubles. He surprised me by talking about the Good Friday earthquake of '64. "You were what?" 2, 3, you guys lived in that trailer park in Anchorage. The quake hits and your dad's been shipped to Nam. My job is to look over you and your mom. Meanwhile, I'm visiting a little honey out in the valley. Girl had a cabin on a lake. We just came in off the ice for a mug of hot cocoa and boom! Looked like dynamite churned up the bottom muck. Shit flew off the shelves, the earth moved in waves like the sea. Spruce trees bent all the way over and slapped the tops on the ground. Sounded like a train running through the living room. Tried calling your mom, but the phone lines were down. I jumped in my truck and headed for Anchorage. Got partway there and had to stop. Highway was too fucked up to drive on. Pavement cracked open, bridges collapsed. I got stuck in traffic. On the flats. Some cars were squashed under a collapsed overpass and half a dozen more kind of piled on. It was 9 or 10 at night and pitch black. Accidents everywhere. The temperature dropped below freezing. Road flares and headlights and flashing hazards made the scene extra spooky. I could taste hysteria in the air. Me and a couple of Hell's Angels from Wasilla got together and made sure people weren't trapped or hurt too bad. Then we started pushing the cars off the road to get ready for emergency crews. We were taking a smoke break when one of the bikers said to shut up a minute. A big, pot-bellied Viking, at least twice the size of me and his younger pal. Fucking enormous. He cocked his head and asked us if we'd heard it too. Somebody moaning for help down on the flats. He didn't hang around for an answer, hopped over the guardrail and was gone. Man on a mission. Guy didn't come back after a few minutes. Me and the younger biker climbed down the embankment and went into pucker brush. Shouted ourselves hoarse and not a damn reply. Mist was oozing off the water and this weird low tide reek hit me. A cross between green gas from inside a blown moose carcass and something sweet like fireweed. I heard a noise, reminded me of water and air bubbles gurgling through a hose. Grace of God, I happened to shine my light on a boot sticking out of the scrub. The skinny biker yelled his buddy's name and ran over there. Uncle Ned had gotten worked up during the narration of his story. He lit another cigarette and paced to the coffee machine in back. Bernice Monson was the receptionist and glared over her glasses. She didn't say anything. In 77, most folks kept their mouths shut when confronted by foamy Vietnam vets. Bernice, like everybody else, assumed Uncle Ned did a jungle tour as the government employee. He certainly resembled the part with his haggard expression, brooding demeanor, and a partialness for camouflage pants. Truth was, while many young men were blasting away at each other in southern Asia, he'd backpacked across Canada, Europe, and Mexico, or went humping foreign broads and scrawled doggerel, as my dad put it. Well, thank you so much once again for hanging out with me tonight on We're Paradox Media's Late Night in the Rockies. It was a pleasure hanging out with you, hopefully entertaining you. I feel bad that we couldn't get further in that story. I was really getting into Uncle Ned's story about probably what she saw in the forest and when they were looking for a dog. Thank you to all my friends out there, wherever you may be listening, Beyond The Omniverse tonight. Had a wonderful time. I can't wait to do it again, hopefully in the near future. I'm hoping to do maybe Trippy TikTok Tuesdays and What About It Wednesdays, or who knows, maybe something on Friday. Still trying to work a schedule out. This is the last week of school for the kids, so we should have more time to do more things. Don't forget, we're all in this together. Together, we can make the world a little better. And together, my friends, we are Paradox Media, because without you, there is no us. Until next time, nighty-night, love and light. Take care of my yous, and I will see you back here, same crazy time, same crazy place.